The gunshot echoed across Widow's Peak just as Clara Whitman pressed her hand to her swollen belly, feeling life kick for the first time. Below them, Samuel Grant's men surrounded their half-built house, torches blazing against the Montana darkness. "You have until dawn to surrender Boone," Grant's voice carried up the ridge, "or I burn everything you love." But Eli Boone didn't reach for his rifle. Instead, he rang the iron bell they'd mounted that morning once, twice, 3 times, and from every corner of Copper Creek lights began moving toward them through the darkness. This is the story of how one widow's grief and one cowboy's revenge became something neither expected, a revolution that would transform an entire frontier town. So settle in, friend, and drop a comment about where you're watching from. Let's see how far this tale of ours can travel. The blood wouldn't stop coming. Clara Whitman pressed harder against the wound, her hands slick and trembling as she worked in the dim light of the kerosene lamp. The miner groaned beneath her touch, his face pale as winter moonlight, sweat beading across his forehead like morning dew on stone. "Stay with me, Mr. Henley," she murmured, reaching for more bandages from the dwindling pile on the rickety shelf. "Your wife's waiting for you. Your boys need their father." But Thomas Henley's eyes were already going glassy, that terrible look she'd seen too many times in the 3 years since she'd started running this makeshift clinic behind Murphy's saloon. The look that said a man was seeing something beyond this world, something that called stronger than any earthly voice could answer. The door burst open, bringing a gust of October wind that sent papers flying and made the lamp flame dance wild shadows on the walls. "Clara." It was young Pete Morrison, hat clutched in his hands, face flushed from running. "There's been another cave-in at the Grant mine. They're bringing 7 men. 7. Clara's heart sank. She barely had supplies for one. "Get Dr. Holbrook. Doc's drunk again, passed out at the poker table. You're all we got." The words hung in the air like accusation. "You're all we got." As if she hadn't heard them 100 times before. As if she hadn't buried her husband 18 months ago, standing at his grave wondering why God had taken a real doctor and left only a half-trained nurse to tend a town that seemed determined to bleed itself dry. Thomas Henley's hand went slack in hers. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, whispering a prayer she wasn't sure she believed anymore, then gently pulled the sheet over his face. Another widow would be made tonight. Another set of boys would grow up without their father. The cycle of Copper Creek continued, relentless as the seasons. "Bring them in," she told Pete, already moving to clear the examination table, though her supplies were nearly gone and her strength even more depleted. "And see if Mrs. Chen has any clean linens to spare. Tell her I'll pay when I can." Pete nodded and disappeared back into the night. Clara stood alone for a moment in the sudden quiet, looking at the covered form of Thomas Henley at the blood-stained floors she'd scrubbed so many times they'd worn smooth at the empty medicine bottles she couldn't afford to refill. She was 32 years old, widowed, childless, and running a clinic that barely kept the town's broken bodies together while her own spirit crumbled a little more each day. Some nights she wondered if it wouldn't be easier to just walk into the wilderness and let the mountain take her the way it had taken James. At least then they'd be together again. At least then this endless ache in her chest might finally stop. The sound of boots on the porch pulled her from her dark thoughts. Multiple boots moving fast. She straightened her back, wiped her bloody hands on her apron, and prepared for another night of fighting death with little more than determination and prayer. But when the door opened, it wasn't the injured miners Pete had promised. A single man stood in the doorway, so tall his hat nearly brushed the frame shoulders, broad enough to block out most of the moonlight. He wasn't injured, at least not in any way Clara could see. His clothes were travel-worn but clean, his face weathered by sun and wind into something that might have been handsome if she'd had any interest in noticing such things anymore. "Clinic's closed," she said automatically, though it was never really closed. "Unless you're dying, in which case take a seat and wait your turn. We've got injured men coming." "I'm not here for medical help." His voice was deep, steady as bedrock, with just a hint of Texas drawl softening the edges. "I'm here for you, Clara Whitman." Her hand moved instinctively to the small pistol she kept in her apron pocket. Copper Creek attracted all kinds of men, most of them bad, some of them worse. "If you're looking for that kind of company, Murphy's got girls upstairs who—" "That's not what I meant." He stepped into the light, and she could see his face more clearly now. Square-jawed, dark eyes that held something she couldn't quite read, not threat exactly, but intensity that made her pulse quicken. A thin scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, silver against sun-darkened skin. "Then state your business, mister. I've got wounded coming, and no time for riddles." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those dark eyes like he was reading something written in small print across her face. Then he spoke 6 words that shattered her world like a stone through glass. "I'll build you a home, and you'll give me a family." Clara actually laughed, a harsh, bitter sound she barely recognized as her own. "You're either drunk or insane. Either way, get out. I've got work." "I'm neither." He stepped closer, and she could smell leather and horse and something else, sage maybe, or juniper. "I know who you are. Widow of Dr. James Whitman, originally from Boston, trained as a nurse at Massachusetts General before your husband brought you west. No children, though, not for lack of trying. Your husband died of fever 18 months ago, leaving you with this clinic, a mountain of debt to Samuel Grant's bank, and a town that takes everything from you and gives nothing back." Each word landed like a blow. Clara's hand tightened on the pistol. "You've done your homework. Congratulations. Now get out before— I also know you're 3 months behind on your loan payments. Grant's going to foreclose by month's end. You'll lose the clinic, your home, such as it is everything. And then what, you've got no family back east who will take you in? They disowned you when you married James instead of that banker's son they'd picked out. You could work as a nurse somewhere else maybe, but your heart's not in it anymore. Some nights you stand at your window looking at the mountain where James died and wonder if it wouldn't be easier to just stop." The word came out as barely a whisper. "Just stop." "I'm not here to hurt you, Clara." His voice gentled, though the intensity never left his eyes. "I'm here to offer you a bargain." "What kind of bargain involves marriage and children with a complete stranger?" "The practical kind." He pulled out a chair and sat down, making himself less imposing, though still commanding the room. "My name is Eli Boone. I've got a claim on Widow's Peak Good Land Water Rights timber. I can build a house that'll stand for generations. But a house isn't a home without a family in it. And a man like me—" He paused, something flickering across his face, too fast to read. "Let's just say traditional courtship isn't in the cards. So you walk into my clinic and propose to the first widow you find. No. I propose to the woman who spent 3 years keeping this ungrateful town alive, who works 18-hour days for people who can't even pay her, who has more steel in her spine than most men I've known, and who deserves better than dying alone in a town that's killing her as surely as it killed her husband." The sound of commotion outside interrupted whatever Clara might have said. Shouts, running feet, the creak of wagon wheels. "The injured," she said, moving toward the door. But Eli was already standing, rolling up his sleeves. "Tell me what you need." "You don't—" "I've got field medicine experience. War teaches a man things. Now tell me what you need and we'll discuss my proposition after these men are tended." For a moment Clara stood frozen. Then the door burst open and Pete stumbled in, supporting a miner whose leg was bent at an unnatural angle, and there was no more time for thinking. "Boil water," she told Eli. "All you can find. Tear those sheets into strips, make them as clean as possible. There's whiskey in the cabinet for sterilizing. Move." For the next 4 hours they worked side by side in a dance of desperate efficiency. Eli's hands were steady and sure, following her instructions without question, anticipating needs before she voiced them. He held men down while she set bones, applied pressure to wounds, while she stitched, spoke in that deep, calm voice to miners delirious with pain, while she extracted shrapnel from torn flesh. 7 men had gone into the mine that morning. 4 would live to see another day. 3 more families joined the ranks of Copper Creek's widows and orphans. When the last patient was stable and the families notified, Clara found herself standing at the wash basin, scrubbing blood from beneath her fingernails while exhaustion made her vision swim. The clinic was quiet now, just the labored breathing of the surviving miners and the distant sound of Murphy's piano from the saloon. "You did good work tonight," Eli said from behind her. She didn't turn around. 3 men died. 4 lived. In a field hospital with those injuries and these supplies, I'd have been lucky to save one. Is that supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to be the truth. She finally turned to face him. He'd rolled his sleeves back down, but bloodstains marked the white cotton like accusations. In the lamplight, the scar on his face seemed deeper, and she wondered what war had taught him about field medicine, what else it had taught him. Why? She asked. Why me? There are younger women, prettier, women who haven't been broken by this place. Why would you want, I don't need pretty, I don't need young, I need strong. I need someone who understands that life is hard and short, and the only meaning we can make from it is what we build with our own hands. He moved closer, not threatening, just present. I've been watching this town for 3 weeks trying to understand it. You're the only thing here worth saving. That's not an answer. What do you really want? What's your real reason for needing a wife and family so suddenly that you'd propose to a stranger? Something shifted in his expression, a door closing behind his eyes. Every man's got his reasons. Mine are my own, at least for now. What I'm offering you is simple home protection respect. A chance to have the family you wanted with James. A life that's more than this. He gestured at the blood-stained clinic, the covered bodies, the endless cycle of death and debt. And what do you get out of it? A wife who knows that marriage is work, not fairy tales. A woman who won't faint at the sight of blood or hardship. Someone who understands that the prettiest words don't mean much when winter comes and the snow's 10 feet deep. He paused. And maybe if we're lucky, something that looks like happiness. Eventually. Clara wanted to laugh again at the absurdity of it all. A stranger walking into her clinic and offering her everything she'd dreamed of and lost, wrapped up in a package that made no sense. But she was too tired to laugh. Too tired to do anything but stare at this mountain of a man who'd spent 4 hours helping her save lives without being asked, without expecting thanks, without flinching at the worst human suffering could offer. I don't even know you, she said. No. But you know this, I stayed. When those men were brought in, I could have walked away. No one would have blamed a stranger for not getting involved, but I stayed. That tells you something. It did. It told her more than she wanted to admit. I need time to think. Grant's bank opens at 9 tomorrow morning. He'll be sending his man around with foreclosure papers before noon. You don't have time. Eli pulled something from his vest pocket, a leather pouch that landed heavy on the table. That's enough to pay your debts, and then some. No strings. Whether you accept my offer or not, the clinic stays open. Clara stared at the pouch like it might bite her. And if I say no, you just give me this money and walk away. If you say no, I build my house alone and live my life alone and probably die alone, and that'll be that. But the clinic stays open. This town needs you even if it doesn't deserve you. And if I say yes, then we get married tomorrow morning, I pay off your debts, and we start building something new. Together. The word hung in the air between them. Together. Such a simple word, but Clara hadn't felt its truth since James died. She'd been alone even in crowds, isolated, even surrounded by people who needed her. The kind of alone that settled into your bones like winter cold and never quite left. This is insane, she said. Most worthwhile things are. I don't love you. I'm not asking you to. Love's a luxury for people with easier lives. What I'm asking for is partnership, respect, commitment to building something that'll outlast us both. And children? You said you wanted a family. If we're blessed with them, yes. If not, we'll make our family other ways. Plenty of orphans in a mining town. Plenty of children who need what we could give them. Clara thought of her empty womb, of the 3 miscarriages that had broken her heart before James's death had shattered what was left. I might not be able to. That's God's business, not mine. I'm asking you to try to build a life with me. Whatever comes of it comes. A groan from one of the patients interrupted them. Clara moved automatically to check on the man adjusting his bandages, feeling his fever. Still high, but steady. He'd likely make it if infection didn't set in. When she turned back, Eli was still waiting, patient as stone, steady as the mountains that surrounded them. Why do I feel like you're not telling me everything? She asked. Because I'm not. But what I'm not telling you won't hurt you. That much I promise. That's not exactly reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be honest. We all have things we don't share, things we carry alone. I'm not asking for your secrets, Clara. I won't burden you with all of mine. What I'm asking for is a chance to build something better than what either of us has now. Outside, Copper Creek was coming alive with the sounds of a new day. Roosters crowing, wagon wheels creaking, the distant ring of hammer on anvil from the blacksmith shop. Another day in a town that would take and take until there was nothing left to give. Clara looked at her hands still stained with blood, despite the washing. Hands that had delivered babies and closed dead men's eyes, that had held James as fever burned him away, that had worked until they were raw, trying to hold back death in a place that courted it daily. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "there are conditions." "Name them." "The clinic stays open. I won't be just a housewife. These people need—" "Agreed, though I'd help you run it properly. Get real supplies, maybe even convince a doctor to come to town. And I want honesty. Maybe not all your secrets, but no lies. If you can't tell me something, say so. Don't lie to me." "Fair enough. What else?" "Respect. In public and private. I won't be ordered around or treated like property." "I wouldn't have chosen you if I wanted property. Anything else?" Clara took a deep breath, feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff with no way to see the bottom. "If we do this, we do it right. A real marriage, not a business arrangement. We try to build something true, even if it starts as something practical." "That's what I'm hoping for." She looked at him for a long moment, this stranger who'd walked into her clinic and offered her a lifeline wrapped in mystery. Everything logical in her said to refuse to send him away to continue on her slow descent into the grave Copper Creek was digging for her. But she was so tired of being logical, so tired of being alone, so tired of fighting death with nothing but determination and watching determination fail again and again. "All right," she heard herself say, the word escaping before she could call it back. "All right, Eli Boone. I'll marry you." He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. Just nodded once as if she'd confirmed something he'd already known. "Tomorrow morning, then. 10 o'clock at the courthouse. Wear something you won't mind remembering. That's it. No flowers. No courting. No. Would flowers change your mind? No. Then why waste time on empty gestures? We'll have years to learn each other's preferences. Tomorrow we start building. Tonight get some rest. You look like you haven't slept properly in months." He was right, of course. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept without jerking awake, certain she'd heard someone calling for help. Certain another crisis was brewing that only she could handle. Eli stood to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. Pack light. Where we're going, we'll be starting fresh. New house, new life, new everything." "Where exactly are we going?" "Widow's Peak, 5 miles north of town, where the lodgepole pines meet the sky. You can see for 50 miles on a clear day, and the sunrise." He trailed off something soft, entering his expression for the first time. "The sunrise looks like God's own promise that the world's worth saving." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone in her clinic with 3 dead men, 4 wounded survivors, and a decision that would change everything. She sat down heavily in James's old chair, the one he'd brought from Boston, its leather worn smooth by years of use. Around her, the clinic held the remnants of their life together, his medical books, the surgical tools he'd been so proud of, the photograph from their wedding day when they'd both believed love could conquer anything. "What am I doing, James?" she whispered to the empty air. "What in God's name am I doing?" But James, as always, now had no answer. Outside her window, Copper Creek went about its morning business. In a few hours, Samuel Grant would send his man with foreclosure papers. By tonight, she'd be homeless, penniless, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Or by tonight, she'd be married to a stranger and starting a new life on a mountain called Widow's Peak. Clara laughed. Then really laughed for the first time in 18 months. Not because anything was funny, but because the absurdity of it all had finally broken through her exhaustion and grief to find something still alive inside her. Something that wanted to know what sunrise looked like from Widow's Peak. Something that was curious about this scarred stranger who handled wounded men with the competence of a battlefield surgeon and spoke of building homes like other men spoke of striking gold. She stood and began to pack, choosing carefully from the meager possessions that filled the small room behind the clinic. Her few dresses worn but clean, James's medical bag, she couldn't leave that behind. The photograph from their wedding wrapped carefully in cloth. Her mother's Bible, though she hadn't opened it in months. The small carved wooden bird James had given her their first Christmas together when they'd still believed they had all the time in the world. As she packed, she tried not to think about what she was doing, tried not to analyze or rationalize or talk herself out of what was clearly madness. Sometimes she thought madness was the only sane response to an insane world. The morning passed in a blur of activity. The surviving miners were stable enough to be moved to their homes where their wives would continue the care Clara had started. She gave each woman detailed instructions, knowing most would be followed, some ignored, and praying the difference wouldn't cost lives. Thomas Henley's widow came for his body. Her face a mask of grief Clara recognized from her own mirror. They didn't speak what was there to say that hadn't been said 100 times before in this town. But Clara pressed the woman's hand and slipped her a small vial of laudanum from her precious supply, for the nights when the grief was too sharp to bear alone. Samuel Grant himself appeared at 11:30, not bothering to send a subordinate. He was a small man made smaller by expensive clothes that didn't quite fit with pale eyes that reminded Clara of a snake's cold calculating, always watching for weakness. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, touching the brim of his hat in a mockery of courtesy, "I trust you've had time to review your situation." "My situation?" Clara continued organizing what was left of her medical supplies, not giving him the satisfaction of her full attention. "Your debts, the foreclosure. Surely you understand that by noon today, this property reverts to the bank. Does it?" She turned to face him, and something in her expression made him take a half step back. "I was under the impression that debts could be paid until close of business. It's only—" She checked James's pocket watch, 11:35. Grant's thin lips pursed. "You don't have the money. We both know that." "What I have or don't have is my business until noon, Mr. Grant. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have patients to tend." "There's no point in prolonging this, Mrs. Whitman. Accept reality. I'm willing to be generous. You can stay on as a tenant, work off some of the debt over time." "How generous? Work for you until I drop dead, you mean? Just another kind of mining, isn't it? Strip everything valuable from a person and leave them hollow." His face flushed. "You should be grateful I'm offering anything at all. A widow with no prospects, no family, no—" "I said good day, Mr. Grant." He stood there for a moment, clearly wanting to say more to press his advantage to grind her down the way he ground down everyone in Copper Creek. But something, maybe the steel in her spine that Eli had mentioned, or maybe just impatience to claim his property, made him leave. Clara watched him go, this small, grasping man who held the fate of so many in his soft, uncalloused hands. By tomorrow, she'd be beyond his reach. The thought gave her a fierce satisfaction she hadn't expected. At 5 minutes to 10, she closed the clinic door behind her and walked to the courthouse. She wore her best dress, navy blue wool, that brought out what James had always said were the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Her hair was pinned up properly, and she'd even found a small cluster of late wildflowers to carry, though she felt foolish holding them. Eli was already there, standing on the courthouse steps like a mountain himself, immovable, patient, inevitable. He'd cleaned up, traded his travel-worn clothes for a black suit that fit him well enough to suggest it wasn't borrowed. His hair was slicked back, revealing more gray at the temples than she'd noticed before. The scar on his face stood out silver in the morning sun. "You came," he said. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might come to your senses." "Too late for that now." He looked at the wildflowers in her hand, and something shifted in his expression. Without a word, he pulled a single rose from inside his jacket. Not a wild rose, but a cultivated one, deep red and perfect, despite the late season. Where he'd found such a thing in Copper Creek, she couldn't imagine. "You said no flowers," she said. "I said they wouldn't change your mind. I didn't say they weren't worth giving." He offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His arm was solid as iron beneath the suit jacket, and she could feel the controlled strength in it, the kind of strength that could build or destroy with equal ease. Inside the courthouse, Judge Harper waited with obvious impatience. He was another of Grant's creatures, fat on bribes and favors, but even he couldn't refuse to perform a legal marriage. "You sure about this, Mrs. Whitman?" Harper asked, his piggish eyes darting between her and Eli. "Marriage is a sacred bond not to be entered lightly." "Just perform the ceremony, Judge," Eli said quietly, but there was something in his tone that made Harper's mouth snap shut. The ceremony was brief, the legal minimum. Clara heard herself saying the words to have and to hold, for better or worse, until death do us part, and wondered if James could hear them wherever he was. Wondered if he'd forgive her for moving on so soon, so strangely, so desperately. When Harper pronounced them man and wife, Eli's kiss was brief, respectful as seal on a bargain rather than a declaration of passion. But his lips were warmer than she'd expected, and for just a moment she let herself imagine this might become something more than survival. They signed the papers making it legal. Clara Whitman died on that ledger, and Clara Boone was born. The change felt both monumental and meaningless. Outside the courthouse, Eli handed her up into a wagon loaded with lumber and supplies. "We need to stop at the bank," he said. Grant was behind his massive oak desk when they entered, sorting through papers with the satisfied air of a man about to feast. He looked up when they entered, and his expression went through several changes: surprise, confusion, and then a slowly dawning rage as he noticed their joined hands. The fresh ink on the marriage certificate Eli laid on his desk. "What is this?" Grant's voice was thin, strained. "Payment in full for all debts owed by my wife," Eli said, setting the leather pouch on the desk with a solid thunk. "Count it if you like. It's all there, plus the interest you've been charging." Grant's face had gone from red to purple. "You can't. Where did you—" "Legal tender for legal debts, Mr. Grant. Unless you're refusing payment." They both knew he couldn't refuse. The law was clear, and there were witnesses in the bank. Grant's hands shook as he counted the money, each coin seeming to cause him physical pain. "This isn't over," he said quietly, looking at Eli with naked hatred. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but this isn't over." "Yes," Eli said simply. "It is." He guided Clara out of the bank, his hand steady on her back, and she could feel the tension in him like a coiled spring. Whatever history existed between Eli Boone and Samuel Grant, it ran deeper than a simple business transaction. They rode out of Copper Creek as the noon sun reached its zenith, the wagon loaded with their combined possessions and hopes. Behind them, the town continued its daily dance with death and debt. Ahead, Widow's Peak rose against the sky, its slopes covered in lodgepole pines that whispered secrets in the wind. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" Clara asked as the town disappeared behind a bend. With Grant, Eli was quiet for a long moment, handling the reins with practiced ease as the horses picked their way up the rough trail. "Someday," he said finally. "When the time is right, I'll tell you everything, but not today. Today is for beginning, not for looking back." Clara wanted to press, but something in his voice warned her off. Everyone had their ghosts. She had James. He had whatever put that recognition in Grant's eyes, that hatred that went beyond a simple financial loss. The trail grew steeper, winding through stands of aspen already turned gold with autumn. The air grew thinner, cleaner, free of the coal smoke and misery that hung over Copper Creek like a shroud. Clara found herself breathing deeply for the first time in months, pulling mountain air into lungs that had forgotten what clean tasted like. "Tell me about Widow's Peak, sis," she said, wanting to fill the silence with something other than unasked questions. "Got its name from a woman who lived there 40 years ago." Eli said, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. "Martha Hayes. Her husband was a trapper gone for months at a time. One winter, he didn't come back. She waded through the snow, through spring melt, through summer. Built herself a cabin right at the peak where she could see for miles in every direction watching for him. Did he ever return? No, but she stayed anyway. Lived there another 20 years, they say. Became something of a legend. Indians would leave food for her trappers, would check on her, but she never left that peak. Said she'd made a promise to wait, and promises were sacred things." "That's terribly sad." "Maybe. Or maybe she found something up there worth more than what she'd lost. Peace, perhaps. Purpose. The knowledge that she'd kept faith when faith was all she had." The wagon created a rise, and suddenly the world opened up before them. The peak stretched out a natural plateau carved by wind and time, surrounded by forests that fell away like green waterfalls down the mountainsides. And the view, God, the view. Clara could see forever, it seemed. Mountain ranges layered against each other in shades of blue and purple clouds, casting shadows that moved across the valleys like living things, and far in the distance, the silver thread of a river catching sunlight like scattered diamonds. "Oh," she breathed, and it was all she could manage. Wait until sunrise, Eli said softly. Or sunset, or a storm rolling in from the west. Every hour here shows you something different, something that makes you understand why Martha Hayes could wait 20 years. He pulled the wagon up near a grove of aspens, their golden leaves rattling in the breeze like nature's own wind chimes. The foundation of a cabin was already laid, stone and mortar solid and square, ready for the walls that would rise from it. You've already started building, Clara said. Started the day I decided to ask you. Seemed presumptuous to do more before I knew your answer. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering just a moment on her waist before stepping back, maintaining that careful distance between them. A business arrangement, she reminded herself. A practical decision. Nothing more. But as she stood there looking out at a view that made her heart ache with its beauty, feeling clean mountain air fill her lungs standing next to a man who'd rescued her from slow death in Copper Creek, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, Martha Hayes had been right. Maybe some things were worth the wait. Maybe some promises, even the strange ones made to strangers, were sacred after all. So, she said, surprising herself with a small smile, where do we start? Eli smiled too, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his scarred face into something almost boyish. We start with shelter, he said. Then we build from there. One board, one nail, one day at a time. He began unloading the wagon and Clara moved to help him. As she lifted a box of supplies, she felt something she hadn't experienced in so long she'd forgotten its name. It took her a moment to recognize it: hope. Fragile as spring ice, tentative as dawn light, but unmistakably there. The sun traced its arc across the sky as they worked sorting supplies, setting up a temporary camp. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable rather than strained. By evening, they had a fire going and a simple meal cooking beans and salt pork. Nothing fancy, but it tasted better than anything Clara had eaten in months. As darkness fell, the stars emerged in numbers she'd never seen in Copper Creek's smoke-hazed sky. They were brilliant, countless, close enough to touch. The Milky Way spilled across the heavens like God's own signature on creation. I haven't seen stars like this since James and I first came west, she said quietly. Tell me about him, Eli said. If you want. She was surprised to find that she did want. So she told him about the idealistic young doctor from Boston who'd read too many dime novels about the frontier, about his passion for helping people, his terrible singing voice, his way of making her laugh even when things were darkest, about the 3 babies they'd lost, and how each loss had carved away a piece of their joy until there was nothing left but determination to keep going. He was a good man, she finished. Too good for Copper Creek. It ate him alive inch by inch, and I couldn't save him. Nobody could save him but himself, Eli said. And it sounds like he chose to spend himself saving others. There are worse ways to go. Is there someone you've lost? She asked carefully. Someone who might object to this arrangement. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then Sarah, my first wife. She died 6 years ago. How, badly. The word was flat final, a door closing on further questions. But then, surprising her, he continued. She deserved better than what happened to her, better than what I let happen. I carry that debt, and I'll carry it until I die. Is that why you're really here? Some kind of penance? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being alone with my ghosts. He stood brushing off his pants. We should set up proper sleeping arrangements. I'll take the wagon bed. You can have the tent. Eli. This is a marriage of convenience, Clara. I meant what I said. I won't press for anything you're not ready to give. We have time to figure out what we are to each other. She watched him arrange blankets in the wagon bed, this strange, scarred man who'd married her and brought her to this mountain peak where the stars pressed close and the world fell away in layers of blue distance. Her husband now in-law, if nothing else. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt that fragile hope flutter again, persistent as a heartbeat. That night, she lay in the tent listening to the wilderness sounds, wind in the pines, the distant howl of wolves, the nearby snort of the horses. Through the canvas, she could see Eli's silhouette by the dying fire, keeping watch over their small camp, protecting what was his, including her now. I'll build you a home, he'd said, and you'll give me a family. As sleep finally claimed her, Clara wondered if perhaps they could give each other something more than that, Something neither of them had dared to name, yet something that might grow as surely as the house that would rise from that stone foundation. Tomorrow they would begin building in earnest. Tonight, for the first time since James died, Clara Whitman, no. Clara Boone. Boone now slept without dreams of death and debt, and the slow, crushing weight of a town that took everything and gave nothing back. On Widow's Peak, beneath an ocean of stars, something new was beginning. Something that would transform not just two broken people, but an entire town that didn't yet know it needed saving. The revolution had begun with 6 simple words and a promise made in darkness. Everything that followed would test whether that promise could hold against the storms to come. The morning came with frost on the canvas, and Eli already working the rhythmic sound of his axe breaking the dawn silence. Clara emerged from the tent to find him splitting logs with mechanical precision, each swing controlled and purposeful. He'd already started a fire and coffee bubbled in a battered pot that smelled like civilization in the wilderness. "You're up early," she said, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders against the mountain chill. "Habit," he replied, not breaking rhythm. "Besides, winter's coming faster than you'd think up here. We need walls before the first real snow." She poured herself coffee, the tin cup warming her hands, and watched him work. In the morning light, she could see the efficiency of his movements, the way he read each log before striking, finding the grain's weakness with an almost supernatural precision. This was a man who understood wood the way she understood wounds, intimately, respectfully, practically. "I can help," she offered. "I'm not some delicate flower who needs protecting." He paused mid-swing, considering her. "Never thought you were. There's a second axe in the wagon, but first breakfast. Can't build on an empty stomach." They ate in companionable silence, biscuits he'd somehow baked in a Dutch oven, preserved peaches, more of that strong coffee. The sun crept higher, painting Widow's Peak gold and driving away the frost. Below them, Copper Creek would be waking to another day of dust and desperation, but up here the world felt clean and possible. After breakfast, they worked side by side. Eli showed her how to read the wood, how to position logs for splitting, how to let the axe's weight do the work rather than forcing it. Her hands blistered within an hour, but she said nothing, just adjusted her grip and kept going. He noticed anyway she saw him watching, but he respected her enough not to comment. By noon, they had enough split wood to begin framing. Eli had already laid out his plans, sketched on brown paper with surprising artistry. The house would be modest but solid. 2 bedrooms, a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with windows facing east to catch morning light. But what caught Clara's attention were the small flourishes he'd included carved details on the door frames, a covered porch with decorative railings, built-in shelves in what he'd marked as Clara's surgery. "You planned a medical room?" she asked, tracing the lines with one finger. "You said the clinic stays open. Can't have you riding to town every time someone needs help. Better they come here." He pointed to another section. "Root cellar beneath for storing medicines. Spring-fed so it'll stay cool even in summer." "You've thought of everything." "I've had time to think." There was weight in those words, years of planning, of waiting for something she didn't fully understand yet. They raised the first wall frame together, Clara steadying while Eli secured the joints. The wood was good lumber, not the cheap pine most settlers used, but seasoned oak that would last generations. She wondered again where he'd gotten the money for all this, for her debts, for quality materials. But every time she started to ask something in his concentrated expression stopped her. It was late afternoon when the riders appeared on the trail below. Eli saw them first, his body tensing like a wolf scenting danger. He moved casually to where his rifle leaned against the wagon, not picking it up, but positioning himself within reach. "Company," he said quietly. 3 men rode up to their camp with the lazy confidence of those who expected no resistance. Clara recognized 2 of them, Burke and Hannigan Samuel Grant's personal enforcers. The third was a stranger, lean and cold-eyed, with a tied-down gun that marked him as more than mere muscle. "Mrs. Whitman," Burke said, touching his hat brim with mock courtesy. "Or should I say Mrs. Boone now? Congratulations on your sudden marriage." "State your business," Eli said, his voice flat and uninviting. Burke's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Mr. Grant wanted us to welcome you to the mountain properly, neighborly-like. We're 5 miles from town, bit far for neighbors." "Oh, but Mr. Grant owns the land all around here. This whole mountain, really. Seems there might be some confusion about your claim. Burke produced a paper from his vest. According to our records, this particular piece of paradise belongs to Grant Mining Corporation. Clara felt her heart sink, but Eli just smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Is that so? He walked to the wagon, deliberately turning his back on the men, and retrieved a leather document case. Funny thing about records, they're only as good as the law that backs them. He pulled out a deed, the paper thick and official with multiple wax seals. Homestead claim filed in Denver 3 months ago, signed by the territorial governor himself. Your boss might own a lot of land, but not this piece. The stranger with the tied-down gun shifted in his saddle. Paper's just paper, friend. Accidents happen in the mountains. Fires, wildcats, sudden storms. Be a shame if something happened to your pretty wife while you were out cutting wood. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees, though the sun still shone bright. Eli's hand didn't move toward his rifle, but something in his stance changed subtle as a shadow shifting. You're right, Eli said conversationally. Accidents do happen. Like when a man named Tucker threatens another man's wife and ends up feeding ravens in a canyon nobody will ever find. Or when 3 riders go up a mountain and only their horses come back down. Mountains are dangerous places. The stranger Tucker hand drifted toward his gun. You threatening us, boy? No, just observing that danger runs both ways. Eli's voice carried something Clara had never heard before, a darkness that made her skin prickle. Tell Grant he's welcome to challenge the claim in court, legal and proper. But if any accidents happen on my land, I'll take it personal. And I've got a long memory for personal grievances. Burke laughed, but it sounded forced. Big talk for one man with a new bride to protect. One man? Eli looked around with exaggerated confusion. I count different. See, every soul Grant has ground under his boot, every widow he's made with his unsafe minds, every orphan he's created with his greed, they're all up here with me. Ghosts have a way of evening odds. Tucker's horse shifted nervously, responding to its rider's tension. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke before a fire. Then Burke backed his horse up a step. We'll pass along your message, Mr. Boone, but Mr. Grant doesn't take kindly to squatters on his mountain. Good thing I'm not squatting then. I'm building. Big difference. The 3 men wheeled their horses and rode away, but Clara saw Tucker look back once, marking them with those cold eyes. When they were gone, she realized she'd been holding her breath. They'll be back, she said. Yes. With more men. Probably. And you're not worried. Eli went back to his work, picking up a plank like nothing had happened. Worry doesn't build houses or stop bullets. Either they come or they don't. Either we're ready or we're not. Worrying just makes you tired. Who are you? The question burst out before she could stop it. Really? Because that wasn't just tough talk. You meant every word. You've killed before. He set down the plank carefully. Yes. In the war. During, after, when necessary. He met her eyes steadily. Does that change things? You want to go back to town? I'll take you. No hard feelings. The debt's still paid. The clinic's still yours. Clara thought about the way Tucker had looked at her, the casual threat of violence against her just to make a point. Then she thought about how Eli had stood between her and danger, without hesitation, without bluster, just quiet readiness to do whatever was necessary. No, she said. I don't want to go back. You sure this is going to get uglier before it gets better? Everything in Copper Creek is ugly. At least here we're building something worth defending. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right then. But we need to prepare for what's coming. Can you shoot? James taught me. I'm no sharpshooter, but I can hit what I aim at if it's close enough. Good. Tomorrow we'll practice. Tonight we keep building. They won't move that fast. Grant likes to think things through, weigh his options. We've got maybe a week before he decides what to do. They worked until darkness forced them to stop raising 2 more wall frames, the skeleton of their future home dark against the stars. Over dinner, venison stew Eli had been slow cooking all day. Clara found herself studying this man she'd married. The scar on his face seemed silver in the firelight, and she wondered about its origin. War wound, bar fight. Something else. Can I ask you something? She said. You can ask anything, doesn't mean I'll answer. Fair enough. The scar. How did you get it? His hand went unconsciously to his face, tracing the line. Sarah, he said simply. My first wife. She was trying to kill me at the time. Clara nearly choked on her stew. What? It's a long story. The short version is that Grant's negligence killed her sister and my unborn child along with a dozen minors. Sarah blamed me for not stopping it for being away when it happened. The grief drove her mad. She came at me with a kitchen knife one night. I didn't defend myself, just stood there and let her cut me. Seemed like the least I owed her. My God, what happened to her? She realized what she'd done, dropped the knife, and ran out into a blizzard. Found her 3 days later frozen solid about a mile from our house. She was carrying our wedding photograph. His voice was steady, but Clara could hear the old pain beneath it, scarred over but never fully healed. And Grant, how was he responsible? I was part owner of the mine then. Silent partner. I put up the money, Grant ran the operation. I was away on business when he decided to skip safety inspections to speed up production. The tunnel collapsed. 14 dead, including Sarah's pregnant sister who'd come to bring the miners lunch. He paused, stirring the fire with a stick. I sold my share to Grant for almost nothing, just wanted out. Took me 6 years to find the courage to come back to do what needs doing, which is justice. Not revenge that would be easy. Justice is harder. It means doing things right, legal and proper, no matter how much I'd rather just put a bullet in him. So you came back, bought land on his mountain, married the woman whose debts he was about to collect. You're baiting him. I'm giving him choices. He can accept that I'm here legally and leave us alone. He can challenge it in court and lose. Or he can do what we both know he'll do, come at us outside the law, show everyone what he really is. And then the whole town sees him for what he is. And maybe, just maybe, they find the courage to stand up to him. Clara absorbed this understanding now, the weight Eli carried, the purpose that drove him. You're using us, our marriage, as part of your plan against Grant. Yes. The simple admission should have made her angry, but instead she found herself oddly relieved. At least it was truth, not pretense. But that's not all it is, he continued. I meant what I said. I want to build something here, a home, a family, a life. The fact that it also serves justice doesn't make it less real. So I'm both a wife and a weapon. You're Clara Boone and you're whatever you choose to be. I just gave you the opportunity. What you do with it is your decision. She considered this as she cleaned the dishes using sand and snow to scour them bright. The mountain night pressed in around their small circle of firelight, vast and indifferent. In town, she'd felt trapped, crushed by the weight of others' needs. Here, despite the danger, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years' possibility. Teach me, she said suddenly. Teach you what? Everything. How to build, how to shoot better, how to fight if necessary. If I'm going to be part of this, I want to be useful, not just protected. You're already useful. You saved 4 men the other night. That's not enough. Not for what's coming. He nodded slowly. All right, we start tomorrow. But Clara, once you learn certain things, you can't unlearn them. It changes you. I've been changed already. James's death changed me. Copper Creek changed me. Maybe it's time I chose my own changes for once. That night, as she lay in the tent, listening to the wind in the pines, Clara thought about transformation, about the widow who'd lived on this peak 40 years ago, waiting for a man who never came. Had she been transformed too, from wife to widow to something else, something that could survive alone on a mountain for 20 years? The next days blurred together in a rhythm of work and preparation. Mornings they built walls, rising windows, framed the house, taking shape like a living thing growing from the mountain itself. Eli was a patient teacher, showing her how to handle tools, read wood grain, fit joints, so tight they'd never need chinking. Afternoons they prepared for war. He taught her to shoot properly, not just point and pull, but really shoot, accounting for wind distance, the kick of different weapons. Her groups tightened from scattered attempts to consistent clusters. He showed her how to move quietly through the forest, how to read tracks, how to find cover in open ground. You're not trying to be a gunfighter, he explained as they practiced. You're trying to survive, different skills. What's the difference? Gunfighters seek confrontation. Survivors avoid it until there's no choice, then end it as quickly as possible. One afternoon, as she was practicing with his rifle, she asked, "How many men have you killed?" Enough to know it's nothing to be proud of, not enough to have lost count. He adjusted her stance slightly. "Killing's easy, Clara. It's living with it after that's hard." "Do you regret it?" "Some. The war ones mostly know it was them or me or the men beside me. The ones after—" He shrugged. "A man came after me in Denver once, drunk, angry about something I can't even remember. I could have walked away, but I was young and proud. Shot him dead in the street, all legal and proper. He had 3 kids. I still send money to his widow when I can find her." "That's unexpected." "What, that I'd feel guilty?" "That you'd do something about it." "Guilt without action is just self-pity. If you're going to carry the weight of something, might as well try to balance the scales a little." She fired again, the shot hitting dead center. "Good," he said. "Now do it again." Between the building and the training, something else was growing. Not love, not yet, but understanding, comfort. They developed rhythms together, who cooked breakfast him, who tended the horses, her who kept watch at night, alternating. They learned each other's silences, when to talk, and when to let quiet do the work. Eli began leaving small touches around their camp wildflowers, on her pillow coffee. Ready when she woke, a carved wooden cup to replace her battered tin one. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that demanded reciprocation. Just small kindnesses that accumulated like snowflakes until they covered everything. Clara found herself reciprocating without thinking. Mending his torn shirt with tiny perfect stitches, baking bread, the way he mentioned his mother used to make it, reading to him from one of James's books by firelight while he carved details for the house. One evening, as she read from Dickens, she looked up to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "What?" she asked. "You have a beautiful voice. When you read, I mean—" "Sarah never—" He stopped, shook his head. "Sorry, I shouldn't compare." "It's all right. She was your wife, part of your history. I have James, you have Sarah. We're both haunted. Maybe that's why this works. We both know what loss feels like." "Maybe." He went back to his carving roses, this time delicate and perfect, despite his large hands. She wondered who they were for, then realized with a start they were for her. Everything he was building carried these small beauties, these unnecessary graces that transformed utility into art. A week after Grant's men had visited, Eli went to town for supplies. Clara wanted to go with him, but he convinced her to stay. "If something happens to me there, you need to be here to defend the claim. Besides, someone needs to keep working on the house. And if something happens to you, then you're a widow with a legal claim to valuable land and the skills to defend it. You'll be fine." "That's not what I meant." He paused in saddling his horse, looking at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "I know what you meant. I'll be careful." He was gone 3 days. 3 days where Clara jumped at every sound, kept the rifle close, barely slept. She continued working on the house, following the plans he'd drawn, but her heart wasn't in it. The mountain felt too big, too empty, without his steady presence. When he finally returned, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies, and something else, a bell bronze and massive, she surprised them both by running to him, stopping just short of embracing him, suddenly aware of the boundary they hadn't crossed yet. "You're back," she said unnecessarily. "Told you I would be." But there was warmth in his voice, and she thought maybe he'd been worried too about leaving her alone, about what he might return to. "What's the bell for?" "Every proper home needs a way to call people. Dinner, danger, celebration, a bell says it all without words." Together they mounted it on a post near the rising house, and when Eli rang it for the first time, the sound carried across the mountain like a proclamation. "We're here," it seemed to say. "We're building something. We're not going anywhere." That night over dinner, Eli told her about his trip to town. "Grant's been busy. He's raised wages at the mine, trying to buy loyalty. Also hired more guns professionals from Denver. The word is, he's planning something, but nobody knows what. Are you worried?" "Cautious. There's a difference." He paused, then pulled something from his pocket. "I got you something." It was a simple gold ring, nothing fancy, but solid and real. "You didn't have a proper wedding ring," he explained. "Thought you should." Clara looked at the ring, then at him. "Eli." It doesn't mean more than you want it to mean, just thought you should have something that shows you're not alone anymore. She slipped it on. It fit perfectly, and its weight felt right somehow, like an anchor in uncertain seas. Thank you. There's one more thing. He seemed suddenly uncertain, an expression she'd never seen on him before. I know this started as a business arrangement, and I know we're building something good here, something solid. But Clara, I need you to know I'm beginning to hope for more than just partnership. Her heart stuttered. Eli. I'm not asking for anything, not pushing. Just wanted you to know where I stand. What you do with that information is up to you. Before she could respond, a shot rang out from the darkness, shattering the window they'd just installed that morning. They dove for cover as more shots followed, muzzle flashes lighting up the tree line like deadly fireflies. How many? Clara asked, rifle already in her hands. 6, maybe 7. Eli was perfectly calm, already returning fire with measured precision. They're trying to pin us down, probably, while others circle around. The bell. Too risky. They'd cut you down before you reached it. Clara heard movement behind the tent and swung her rifle around, firing at a shadow that grunted and fell. First blood. She waited to feel something, guilt, horror, satisfaction, but there was only the need to survive. The firefight lasted maybe 10 minutes, but felt like hours. Clara lost count of her shots, focused only on muzzle flashes and moving shadows. Beside her, Eli was lethal efficiency, each shot deliberate and effective. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The night went quiet except for their ragged breathing and the moaning of wounded men in the darkness. Stay here, Eli ordered, but Clara followed him anyway as he checked the bodies. 4 dead, 2 wounded, 1 fled. None of them were the men who'd visited before. These were hired guns professionals who'd underestimated their targets. We need to get them to town, Clara said, kneeling beside one of the wounded. Despite everything, her healer's instincts kicked in. They came here to kill us, and now they're wounded men who need help. That's what separates us from them. Eli looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. I'll get the wagon. They loaded the wounded men carefully, Clara doing what she could to stabilize them for the journey. Neither man was conscious, which was probably fortunate. I'll take them, Eli said. You stay? We both go, or we both stay. I'm not sitting here wondering if you're riding into an ambush. He didn't argue further. They rode through the darkness, the wounded men groaning with each bump in the trail. The journey felt endless, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible attack. But they reached Copper Creek without incident. The town was awake despite the hour gunfire carries far in mountain air, and everyone wanted to know what had happened. They left the wounded men at the clinic, now run by a drunk doctor who barely looked up from his bottle. Clara insisted on treating them properly before leaving, ignoring the doctor's slurred protests. Grant was waiting outside when they emerged, surrounded by his remaining men. The whole town seemed to be watching from windows and doorways, drawn by the drama, but unwilling to get involved. You killed 4 of my employees, Grant said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Your employees tried to murder us in our home, Eli responded. We defended ourselves. Sheriff can investigate if he wants. We're happy to cooperate. The sheriff, another of Grant's creatures, shuffled nervously. Now let's not be hasty. No investigation needed, Grant interrupted. This was clearly a misunderstanding. Some of my security got overzealous, thought they saw rustlers. Tragic mistake. Interesting mistake shooting through our window, Clara said. Almost like they knew exactly where we'd be sitting at dinner. Grant's pale eyes fixed on her. You should be more careful, Mrs. Boone. Mountains are dangerous. Accidents happen all the time. Yes, Eli said quietly, they do. Like when a mine owner skips safety inspections and 14 people die, that kind of accident. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. Grant went rigid, his face flushing. You, he breathed. You're him. Sarah's husband. I should have recognized the scar. Hello, Samuel. Been a while. You're supposed to be dead. The report said you died in the war. Reports were wrong. I've been busy. Learning things, legal things, like how you've been claiming land that isn't yours, charging illegal interest rates, bribing officials. The territorial governor found it all very interesting. Grant stepped backward, his men's hands moving to their weapons. But the townspeople were listening now. Really listening. "You can't prove anything," Grant said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I don't have to. You're doing it for me. Every illegal act, every threat, every murder attempt, it's all adding up, Samuel, and the whole town's watching." Clara felt the shift in the air, subtle but real. The townspeople were still afraid, but something else was mixing with the fear now. Hope, maybe. Or just curiosity about what would happen when someone finally stood up to Samuel Grant. "This isn't over," Grant said. "No." Eli agreed. "It's just beginning." They rode home as dawn broke over the mountains, painting the peaks gold and pink. The house stood intact, their work undamaged, except for the broken window and bullet holes that could be patched. "He knows who you are now," Clara said. "He'll be more dangerous." "Or more desperate. Desperate men make mistakes." "What aren't you telling me?" "There's more to this than just Sarah and the mine collapse." Eli was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Grant killed my brother too. Not directly, he hired men to do it. Tom was going to testify about the safety violations. They made it look like a robbery, but I knew. I've always known. So this is about revenge after all." "No. Revenge would be me putting a bullet in Grant's head and calling it justice. This is about something bigger. It's about showing this town they don't have to live under his boot. It's about building something better where something corrupt used to be." He looked at her. "It's about proving that men like Grant don't always win." Clara thought about the townspeople watching from their windows, afraid but alert. About the way conversations had stopped when they'd ridden past, not from hostility, but from attention. Change was a slow thing in places like Copper Creek, but maybe, just maybe, it was beginning. "All right," she said. "Then we'd better get back to building. That house won't finish itself. Together. Together." As they worked to repair the damage from the night's attack, Clara found herself thinking about the ring on her finger, about Eli's confession before the shooting started, about what they were really building here. It was more than a house, more than a challenge to Grant's authority. It was a declaration that life could be more than survival, that two broken people could create something whole, that love might grow even in soil watered with blood and sorrow. The bell rang out across the mountain as Eli tested its mounting, making sure the night's violence hadn't damaged it. The sound carried far-reaching Copper Creek below, where people paused in their labors to listen. It sounded like a challenge. It sounded like a promise. It sounded like change coming to the mountain, whether the mountain was ready or not. The storm arrived 3 weeks later, just as they were setting the roof beams. Clara saw it building all morning, clouds piling up against the western peaks like dark wool against a loom. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour, and the wind began to howl with a voice that seemed almost personal in its fury. "We need to secure everything," Eli shouted over the rising gale. "This is going to be bad." They worked frantically, lashing down lumber-moving tools into the wagon, reinforcing the tent. The first snow came sideways, sharp as needles against exposed skin. Within minutes, visibility dropped to mere feet. "Get to the tent," Eli ordered, but Clara was already moving toward the horses, who were rearing against their tethers in panic. "They'll break free," she called back. "Help me calm them." Together they fought through the wind to reach the animals, speaking soothing words that were torn away the moment they left their lips. One of the horses the mare Eli had bought in town had already scraped her leg raw against a tree in her terror. "We need to get them to shelter," Clara said, blood from the mare's wound staining her hands red. "There's a cave about a quarter-mile east. Can you make it?" She nodded, though truthfully she wasn't sure. The cold was already numbing her fingers and the snow was building fast. But the horses would die if left exposed, and they needed those horses to survive. They untied the animals and led them into the storm using the rock face as a guide. What should have been a 5-minute walk stretched into an eternity of white blindness and screaming wind. Clara lost all sense of direction, trusting only Eli's steady presence beside her and his apparent knowledge of every stone on this mountain. The cave, when they finally stumbled into it, was a blessed relief. It wasn't large, barely big enough for them and the 3 horses, but it was dry and cut the wind to nothing. Eli had obviously used it before there was dry wood stacked against one wall, supplies wrapped in oilcloth, even matches in a waterproof tin. You prepared for this, Clara said through chattering teeth. I prepare for everything, he replied, already building a fire. Strip out of those wet clothes before you freeze. Like, Eli, modesty won't keep you from losing fingers to frostbite. There are blankets in that pack. Change now, argue later. She did as instructed, turning her back to him while she peeled off frozen layers and wrapped herself in the blankets. They were rough wool, but warm and dry. When she turned back, Eli had done the same, the fire beginning to throw heat into their small shelter. Outside, the storm raged like something alive and angry. The cave mouth showed only a wall of white, and the sound was tremendous, like standing inside a waterfall. Clara tended to the mare's leg while Eli melted snow for water, both of them working in the unconscious rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks. This could last days, Eli said, settling against the cave wall with his rifle across his knees. Do we have supplies for that? Some. Enough. He studied her across the fire. You're not scared. It wasn't a question, but Clara considered it anyway. No, should I be? Most people would be, trapped in a cave with someone they barely know, storm trying to tear the mountain apart outside. I've been trapped in worse places with people I knew too well. She thought of those last months with James, watching him fade while she was helpless to stop it. At least here, we're both alive, both fighting. That's better than the alternative. You miss him, James, every day, but differently now. She struggled to find the words. Before, missing him was like drowning. Now it's like carrying a stone in my pocket. Always there, always heavy, but not stopping me from walking forward. That's a good way to put it. Eli added more wood to the fire. Sarah's ghost used to scream at me. Now she mostly whispers. What does she say? That I should have been there, that I could have prevented it, that I'm a coward for running away afterward. He paused. That I don't deserve a second chance. Do you believe her? Sometimes, less lately. He looked at Clara directly. You quiet her some. Is that wrong to say? I don't know. Is it wrong that you quiet James for me? They sat with that admission between them, the fire crackling and the storm roaring and something shifting in the space they shared. Clara found herself studying Eli's face in the firelight, the way the scar made shadows, the lines around his eyes, that spoke of laughter as well as sorrow. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something compelling about him, something that made her want to keep looking. Tell me about the war, she said. You never talk about it. Nothing good to tell. Tell me anyway. He was quiet for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then he began to speak, his voice low and steady, telling her about mud and blood and boys dying far from home, about the sound cannon made when it turned men into mist, about holding his best friend while his guts spilled out, lying that everything would be fine, about the things men did to survive and the things they did that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with the madness that combat brought. I was at Antietam, he said. Bloodiest day in American history, they called it. 23,000 casualties in 12 hours. The cornfield there afterward, you couldn't see the ground for the bodies. They were stacked like cordwood, blue and gray, all mixed together, no difference anymore, except the dead and the dying. How did you survive? Luck. Nothing more noble than that. Men better than me died while I lived. No sense to it, no meaning, just luck. Is that where you met Grant? No, that came later after the war. I had money from my family's farm, wanted to invest it somewhere far from memories. Met Samuel in Denver. He had big dreams and bigger talk. Convinced me that Copper Creek was the future, that we'd make fortunes and build an empire. Eli laughed bitterly. Built an empire, all right. An empire of graves. The storm intensified if such a thing was possible. Snow had drifted across half the cave entrance, providing insulation, but also trapping them more completely. The horses had calmed, standing close together for warmth, their breath making clouds in the cold air. We should sleep in shifts, Eli said. Keep the fire going. I'm not tired. It was true. Despite the exhaustion of fighting the storm, Clara felt wide awake, hyper-aware of everything. The sound of Eli's breathing, the way the firelight moved, the strange intimacy of their situation. Neither am I, he admitted. Clara, there's something else I need to tell you. About Grant, about why I really came back. She waited, sensing this was important, maybe the last piece of the puzzle she'd been trying to solve since he'd walked into her clinic. There's a federal marshal coming. Been corresponding with him for 2 years, sending evidence of Grant's crimes. The attack on our house, the men who died, it's all being documented. Grant doesn't know it yet, but he's already caught. Every illegal move he makes just tightens the noose. So this whole thing, our marriage, the house, the confrontation, it's all to make him react, to make him incriminate himself. Partly. But Clara, you have to believe me, what's between us isn't part of the plan. That's real. As real as anything in my life has ever been. She wanted to be angry. Felt she should be angry. He'd used her, made her part of his scheme without her knowledge. But looking at him across the fire, seeing the genuine fear in his eyes that she might reject him now that she knew the truth, she found she couldn't summon rage. When were you going to tell me? After it was over. After Grant was arrested and you were safe. I thought if you knew you might be in more danger, or you might leave. You thought I was too weak to handle the truth. No, I thought I was too weak to risk losing you. The admission hung between them like a physical thing. Clara felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she'd built after James's death. Not breaking, not yet, but definitely cracking. Eli. A gunshot cut through the storm's howl, followed by another. Then voices barely audible, but definitely human somewhere outside in the white chaos. Eli was already moving, checking his rifle, pulling on his still damp coat. Stay here. Guard the horses. Like hell. Clara was already reaching for her own weapon. We do this together or not at all? He looked like he wanted to argue, then nodded. Stay low. The snow will muffle sound, but also hide movement. They could be anywhere. They crept to the cave entrance, peering out into the blinding white. At first there was nothing but wind and snow. Then Clara saw them dark shapes moving below, at least 6 men struggling up the slope toward their position. Grant's men, Eli said quietly. They must have followed us, waited for the storm to attack. In this weather, that's suicide. Or desperation. Grant knows time's running out. The lead man was Tucker, the cold-eyed gunman from their first encounter. Even through the storm, Clara could see his determined progression toward the cave. Somehow, they'd tracked them here. We're trapped, she said. No. We have the high ground and shelter. They're exposed and freezing. Time's on our side. Unless they brought enough men to wait us out. Then we make them pay for every foot of ground. Eli positioned himself at one side of the cave mouth. Clara, whatever happens, don't let them take you alive. Grant's men, they're not kind to women. I know. She'd treated enough of their victims in her clinic to understand what he meant. I won't let that happen. The first shot came from below, sparking off the rock above their heads. Eli returned fire, his shot catching one man in the shoulder and spinning him back down the slope. Then the battle was joined in earnest gunfire, echoing strangely in the storm, muffled and distorted by wind and snow. Clara focused on Tucker, tracking his movement through the white. He was smart, using the storm for cover, advancing in short rushes, while his men provided covering fire. But he didn't know Clara could shoot, assumed she was just another helpless woman. His mistake. When Tucker broke from cover 30 yards away, Clara led him perfectly and squeezed the trigger. The shot took him center mass, and she watched him crumple into the snow with a feeling of grim satisfaction. One threat removed. Good shot, Eli said, already tracking another target. The firefight continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The storm was their greatest ally, making it impossible for Grant's men to coordinate or aim effectively. One by one, the attackers fell back, dragged their wounded, or simply disappeared into the white void. Finally, silence except for the storm. Eli kept watch while Clara checked their ammunition. They were low, dangerously so. They'll be back, Eli said. Not in this storm. Even Grant's not that stupid. No, but after. This isn't over. Clara moved closer to him, needing the human contact, the reassurance of his solid presence. Why does he hate you so much? It can't just be about the mine. I took something from him once, something he valued more than money. Sarah? No. Hope. Eli turned to look at her. I was supposed to be his example of what happened to people who opposed him. Broken, destroyed, driven away. But I came back. Came back stronger, smarter with the law on my side. That terrifies him more than any gun. They maintained watch through the night as the storm gradually exhausted itself. By dawn, the wind had died to occasional gusts and the snow had stopped falling. The world outside the cave was transformed, buried under feet of pristine white that hid the violence of the night before. "We should check for bodies," Clara said. "We should get back to the house first, see what's left." They led the horses out carefully, the animals nervous but manageable. The journey back to their camp was surreal, landmarks erased by snow, the landscape alien and beautiful. When they finally crested the rise to their building site, Clara's heart sank. The house frame still stood, but barely. The storm had torn away much of what they'd built, leaving twisted timber and scattered plans. Weeks of work destroyed in a single night. The tent was gone entirely, their supplies scattered or buried. "We can rebuild," Eli said, but his voice was hollow. "With what winter's here now? We don't have time. We have what we need." They turned to find 3 men on horseback watching them. Not Grant's men. These were different. Weathered faces, work-worn hands, the kind of men who'd spent their lives underground. Miners from Copper Creek. "Mrs. Clara," one of them said, touching his hat. "Mr. Boone, we heard the shooting last night, came to see if you needed help." "Why?" Eli's hand stayed near his gun. "Because you saved my brother," the man said simply. "That night at the clinic when Grant's mind collapsed. You saved 4 men. My brother was one of them." He gestured to his companions. "They're kin, too. We owe you." "You don't owe," Clara began, but the miner interrupted. "Yes, ma'am, we do. And we're not the only ones. Word's spreading in town about what Grant tried to do here. People are talking. Some are even listening." "Grant owns the town," Eli said flatly. "He owns the buildings, the businesses, the fear." The miner spat tobacco juice into the snow. "But he doesn't own us. Not anymore. Not after we saw you stand up to him. Not after we heard why you really came back, Mr. Boone. You know, about your wife, your brother. The mine collapsed 6 years ago." "Yeah, we know. We always knew. Just nobody had the courage to do anything about it. Until now." The 3 men dismounted, already surveying the damage to the house. "This can be fixed," one said. "Take maybe a dozen men. 3-4 days. We know others who will help. Good men who are tired of being afraid." "Grant won't let that happen," Clara said. "Grant's got bigger problems. Federal marshal arrived in town this morning, asking questions, looking at books. Grant's locked himself in his mansion trying to figure out what to do." Eli and Clara exchanged glances. The marshal was early, probably drawn by reports of the violence. "How do you know this?" Eli asked. "My wife works in Grant's house, cooking, cleaning. She hears things." The miner smiled grimly. "Grant never notices the help. Talks like we're not there. Big mistake." Over the next hours, more people arrived. First a trickle, then a stream. Men with tools and lumber, women with food and warm clothes. By noon, there were 30 people working on the house rebuilding what the storm had torn down. Clara moved among them, treating minor injuries, listening to their stories. Each had a grievance against Grant, a reason to be here despite the risk. A son killed in an unsafe mine. A farm foreclosed on dubious terms. A daughter dishonored by Grant's men with no justice possible. "You started something," Mrs. Chen said, pressing a bundle of herbs into Clara's hands. "My husband says it's dangerous. I say danger is better than slow death." As the sun reached its zenith, Eli rang the bell. The sound carried across the snowy landscape, clear and strong. Everyone stopped working to listen. "If we're doing this," Eli said, addressing the gathering, "we do it right. Not as a mob, but as a community. We follow the law, we protect each other, and we build something better than what we're tearing down. Agreed?" The murmur of assent was unanimous. Clara felt something electric in the air, a charge of possibility that made her skin tingle. This was how revolutions began, not with grand declarations, but with ordinary people deciding they'd had enough. The work continued through the day. By evening, the house frame was restored and reinforced stronger than before. A communal meal was prepared, everyone sharing what they'd brought. Children played in the snow, while their parents planned and plotted not for violence but for legal resistance, economic pressure, organized defiance. As the gathering broke up, people heading back to town before dark, the miner who'd arrived first pulled Eli aside. Clara was close enough to hear. "Grant's planning something. My wife couldn't get details, but he sent riders out this afternoon. Fast riders heading toward Denver. Hired guns. Maybe, or lawyers. Either way, trouble." After everyone left, Clara and Eli stood alone beside their partially rebuilt house, watching the sun set over the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, the snow reflecting the colors like a vast mirror. "It's beautiful," Clara said. "It's war," Eli replied. "Grant won't accept this. He'll strike back hard. Then we'll be ready. The town, the people, us." She took his hand, feeling the calluses and scars. "Whatever happens, we face it together." That night they slept in the rebuilt structure, just a roof and walls, but somehow more home than any place Clara had lived since James died. They laid their bedrolls close for warmth, the boundary between them thinning, but still present. "Clara," Eli said in the darkness. "Yes." "What I said before in the cave, about you being real, not part of the plan, I meant it." "I know. Could you ever—" She knew what he was trying to ask. Could she ever love him? Could she ever move beyond James's ghost? Could she ever trust someone who'd initially deceived her, even with good intentions? "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I want to find out." His hand found hers in the darkness, and they lay there listening to the wind and the settling snow, two damaged people in a damaged house on a mountain that might kill them both. But together, definitely together. The next morning brought sunshine and melting snow and a rider from town spurring his exhausted horse up the trail. Clara recognized him, Pete Morrison, the boy who'd brought news of the mine collapse to her clinic that night Eli had first appeared. "Mrs. Clara, Mr. Boone," he gasped, sliding from his saddle. "You need to know Grant's gone crazy. He's arrested. Half the town council says they're conspiring against him. The federal marshal's locked up too. Grant's claiming he's an imposter." "That's not possible," Eli said. "Grant doesn't have that authority." "He does if the sheriff backs him, and Judge Harper. They're saying it's martial law that there's been an insurrection." Pete's young face was pale with fear. "He's coming for you both. Says you're the ringleaders. He's got 40 men, maybe more. Professional killers from Denver." Clara felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. 40 men. They couldn't fight those odds. "When?" Eli asked, already moving toward his weapons. "Tomorrow dawn, maybe sooner. Grant wants to make an example, says he'll burn the house, hang Mr. Boone, and—" Pete couldn't look at Clara. "He said things about Mrs. Clara, bad things." "Ride back to town," Eli told the boy. "Tell anyone who'll listen to get their families somewhere safe. This is going to get ugly." After Pete left, Clara and Eli stood looking at each other, the weight of what was coming settling on them like snow. "We could run," Clara said. "Leave now, be in the next territory by morning." "Could," Eli agreed. "But then Grant wins. And everyone who stood with us yesterday pays the price. We can't fight 40 men." "No, but we might not have to." Eli moved to the bell, his hand resting on the rope. "Pete will spread the word. The people who came yesterday, they'll hear what Grant's planning. The question is, will they come when we call? That's a big gamble. Everything worthwhile is." They spent the day preparing. Eli showed Clara defensive positions, escape routes if things went badly. They loaded every weapon, prepared ammunition, set up fallback points. But both knew it was largely futile. 40 professional killers would overwhelm them in minutes. As darkness fell, they ate what might be their last meal together. The house so recently rebuilt seemed to mock them with its incompleteness. All that work, all that hope, about to be destroyed. "I'm sorry," Eli said suddenly. "I brought this on you. If I'd never come to your clinic, I'd be dead by now," Clara interrupted. "Or wishing I was. You gave me purpose again, Eli. You gave me hope. Whatever happens tomorrow, I don't regret it. Not even the lies. Not even those. You were trying to protect me. I understand that now." They sat in silence for a while, then Eli stood. There's something I need to tell you about Sarah, about how she really died. Clara waited, sensing this was the last secret, the one that haunted him most. She didn't run into that blizzard by accident. She knew what she was doing. After she cut me, after she saw my blood, she said something, said she was sorry, but she couldn't live with the hate anymore. Couldn't live knowing she'd blamed me for something that wasn't my fault. So she walked into that storm on purpose to end it. Oh, Eli. I could have stopped her, could have held her back, but I let her go. I was so tired of the anger, the blame, the fighting. I let my wife walk to her death because I was too much of a coward to fight for her anymore. Clara rose and went to him, taking his face in her hands, making him look at her. You weren't a coward. You were human. And she made her choice just like we're making ours now. What choice is that? To stand and fight, to protect what we've built, to believe that people will choose courage over fear when given the chance. She kissed him, then surprising them both. Not a desperate kiss or a passionate one, but something deeper. A promise, a seal, a declaration that whatever came with dawn, they would face it as one. When they pulled apart, Eli's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Clara, Shh. She placed a finger on his lips. Tomorrow we can say everything that needs saying. Tonight, just hold me. They lay together, fully clothed on the bedroll, Clara's head on Eli's chest, listening to his heartbeat. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the walls they'd built together. In a few hours, Grant and his army would come. They would probably die defending this incomplete house on a mountain named for waiting. But as Clara felt Eli's arms tighten around her, she realized she wasn't afraid. She'd found something worth fighting for, someone worth dying beside if necessary. After months of numbness, she was fully alive again, even if only for these last few hours. Clara. Eli's voice was soft in the darkness. Yes, I love you. The words should have been impossible. They'd known each other only weeks. Their marriage was supposed to be practical, not romantic. But lying there in his arms, facing probable death at dawn, Clara found they were the only words that made sense. I love you too, she whispered. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle this time, like a benediction. In the distance, wolves howled their voices, carrying across the mountain like a lament, or perhaps a war song. Dawn would tell which. They dozed fitfully, taking turns keeping watch. Every sound might be Grant's men arriving early. Every shadow could hide death. But the night passed quietly, the calm before the storm. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Eli stood and checked his rifle one last time. It's time. Clara rose beside him, her own weapon ready. Together they stepped outside to meet whatever came with the new day. The bell hung silent, waiting. Soon, very soon, they would ring it. And then they would learn if a town's worth of courage could outweigh one man's greed and 40 killers' guns. The sun hadn't yet appeared, but its light was painting the peaks gold and pink. It was, Clara thought, a beautiful morning to die. Or perhaps, against all odds, a beautiful morning to live. In the distance, they could hear horses. Many horses. Grant's army was coming. Eli reached for the bell rope, then paused. No matter what happens, Clara, this was worth it. You were worth it. We were worth it, she corrected. He smiled, that rare transformative expression that made her heart skip. Then he rang the bell, 3 long, clear notes that echoed across the mountain and down into the valley where Copper Creek was just awakening. The sound seemed to hang in the air forever, a question and a challenge and a plea all at once. Would anyone answer? Would anyone come? The horses were getting closer now. Clara could make out individual riders, dark shapes against the snow. So many of them. Too many. But then from below, from the direction of town, came an answering sound. Not a bell, but voices. Many voices raised in shouts, and more horses riding hard up the mountain trail. They came, Clara breathed. They actually came. The riders from town reached them first, and Clara's heart swelled as she recognized faces. Not just the miners from yesterday, but shopkeepers, ranchers, even some of Grant's own former employees. Mrs. Chen was there, rifle across her saddle, her usually gentle face set with determination. Doc Holbrook, sober for once, carried his medical bag and an old army pistol. Even Martha Williams, the schoolteacher who'd never spoken above a whisper, gripped a shotgun with white-knuckled hands. "Thought you could use some help," the lead miner said, dismounting beside them. "Name's Jack Walsh, by the way. Figure if we're going to die together, might as well know each other's names." "How many?" Eli asked, scanning the growing crowd. 43 so far. More coming, maybe. Some are still deciding if their courage is bigger than their fear. And Grant, coming up the North Trail with his hired killers. He stopped at the Turner farm, burned their barn as a warning. But that just made more people angry enough to ride. Clara looked at the assembled townspeople, ordinary folks who'd probably never fired a shot in anger, now preparing to face professional gunmen. "This isn't your fight," she said. "Eli and I, we chose this. You don't have to—" "Begging your pardon, Mrs. Clara," interrupted an older woman Clara recognized as a widow, who'd lost her husband in Grant's mines. "But you're wrong. This has always been our fight. We were just too scared to see it, too beaten down. You and Mr. Boone here, you showed us something we'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That standing up hurts less than kneeling down forever." Eli began organizing the defenders, using his military experience to position people effectively. The house provided good cover, and the elevation gave them advantage. But 40 professional killers were still 40 professional killers. "Listen up," Eli called out, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Grant's men are killers, but they're also mercenaries. They fight for money, not cause. Make it expensive for them, make them bleed for every foot of ground, and they might reconsider. We don't have to kill them all. Just make them think it's not worth their pay." "And Grant?" someone asked. "Grant's mine," Eli said quietly, but everyone heard the iron in his voice. The sun finally crested the eastern peaks, flooding Widow's Peak with golden light when Grant's force came into view. They'd spread out in a long line, military style, approaching with the confidence of superior numbers. Grant himself rode in the center, surrounded by bodyguards, his pale face visible even at distance. "That's close enough, Grant," Eli called out when they were within rifle range, but not yet optimal distance. The line of riders stopped. Grant rode forward a few paces, just him and Tucker's replacement, a thin man with dead eyes and twin pistols. "Boone," Grant called back, his reedy voice carrying poorly in the morning air. "You're under arrest for sedition, conspiracy, and murder. Surrender now, and I might let your wife live." "Under whose authority?" Clara shouted. "A sheriff you bought, a judge you own." "Under the authority of civilization itself," Grant replied. "You've turned these good people into a mob, poisoned them against legitimate business interests. It ends now." "The only thing ending is your stranglehold on this town," Eli said. "The federal marshal you imprisoned, his office knows where he is. They're coming. You've got maybe 2 days before real law arrives. Give up now, and you might avoid the noose." Grant laughed high and slightly hysterical. "You think I care about federal marshals? I own judges, senators, governors. One backward territory marshal means nothing." "Maybe, but 43 angry townspeople might mean something." Eli gestured to the assembled defenders. "These aren't hired guns, Samuel. These are people with grievances, people whose families you've destroyed. They won't run when the shooting starts. They've got nowhere to run to." Clara could see doubt creeping into some of the hired guns' faces. Fighting 2 people for good money was one thing. Fighting nearly 50 desperate locals was another. "Last chance, Boone. Surrender, and this ends clean." "You want me?" Eli stepped forward away from cover. "Come and take me yourself. You and me, Samuel. End this the way it should have ended 6 years ago." Grant's face went purple. "Kill them all!" he screamed. The morning exploded into gunfire. Clara dropped behind cover as bullets whined overhead, chips of wood and stone flying everywhere. The townspeople returned fire, their volleys ragged but enthusiastic. The professional killers advanced in disciplined fashion, using cover effectively, but the elevation and defensive positions were proving their worth. Beside her, Mrs. Chen fired steadily, methodically, her face calm as if she were hanging laundry instead of fighting for her life. On the other side, young Pete Morrison, when had he returned, fumbled to reload with shaking hands. "Breathe, Pete," Clara told him, surprised by her own steadiness. "Just breathe and aim. They're just men." "Scary men," Pete muttered, but he raised his rifle again. The first of Grant's men reached the incomplete walls of the house, trying to flank them. Eli was there, his rifle speaking with deadly precision. 3 men fell before the others pulled back, but more were coming and ammunition wouldn't last forever. "They're circling east," Jack Walsh shouted, "trying to get behind us." "I've got it," Doc Holbrook said, leading a group of 5 townsmen to meet the threat. Clara heard gunfire from that direction, shouts, screams. She couldn't tell who was winning. A hired gun appeared suddenly at the window beside her gun raised. Clara shot him point blank, watching him tumble backward into the snow. No hesitation, no regret, just survival. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The sunrise painted everything gold and red, beautiful and terrible simultaneously. Bodies dotted the snow, some moving, some still. The air stank of gunpowder and blood. "Magazine's empty," someone called out. "Nearly out here too," another voice added. They were running out of ammunition. Claire could see Eli knew it too, his face grim as he counted his remaining rounds. Grant's men had pulled back slightly, regrouping, preparing for a final assault. "It was a good try," Jack Walsh said, blood streaming from a graze on his cheek. "At least we stood up." "It's not over," Eli said, but Clara heard the doubt in his voice. Then impossibly, she heard something else. Singing. Someone was singing, the voice carrying clear and strong across the battlefield. She recognized the hymn, Amazing Grace, and the voice. It was Martha Williams, the schoolteacher, standing fully exposed on the eastern ridge, singing as if she were in church on Sunday. "What the hell is she doing?" someone muttered. But then another voice joined her. Then another. Soon a dozen people were singing, their voices mixing with the gun smoke and morning air. It was surreal, beautiful, and absolutely insane. Grant's men hesitated, confused by this development. Some actually lowered their weapons, staring at the singing townspeople. And that's when Clara saw them, more riders coming from the south. But these wore badges, and the lead rider had the bearing of authority that didn't need to be bought. "Federal marshals," Eli breathed. "The real ones." Grant saw them too. His scream of rage was audible even over the singing. Kill them all, now!" But his hired guns were already backing away. Fighting locals was one thing. Fighting federal marshals was another. The thin man with twin pistols actually holstered his weapons and raised his hands. "Contracts void, Grant," he called out. "You never said nothing about federal involvement. I'm paying you. Not enough for a federal murder charge." One by one, the hired killers laid down their weapons. Some fled immediately, spurring their horses down the mountain. Others simply sat down in the snow, hands visible, waiting to be arrested. Grant sat on his horse, looking around wildly as his army evaporated. "You can't do this," he screamed. "I own this town. I made it. It's mine." The lead federal marshal rode up to him. "Samuel Grant, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, corruption, and about a dozen other charges I'll remember when I've had coffee." He looked around at the battlefield, at the dead and wounded. "Jesus Christ, what happened here?" "Justice," Eli said simply. "Long overdue justice." What followed was controlled chaos. The federal marshals took charge, arresting Grant and his remaining loyal men, including the sheriff and Judge Harper, who'd ridden up belatedly expecting victory and finding defeat. Doc Holbrook and Clara worked on the wounded, saving who they could. The final count was 12 dead, 8 of Grant's hired guns. 3 townspeople and Tucker, who'd apparently survived Clara's shot in the storm, only to die in this battle. As they worked, Clara noticed Eli standing apart, watching Grant being shackled and loaded into a prison wagon. She went to him, taking his hand. "It's over," she said. "The easy part is," he replied. "Now comes the hard part, building something better to replace what we've torn down." The sun was fully up now, warming the air, beginning to melt the blood-stained snow. The townspeople were gathering, some crying over losses, others celebrating survival, all looking slightly stunned by what they'd accomplished. Jack Walsh approached them. "Town council's meeting tonight. What's left of it anyway? We need new leadership, new laws, new everything. We were hoping that as folks want you both there, maybe to help figure out what comes next." "We're not town leaders," Clara protested. "You are now," Jack said firmly. "You two lit the match. Can't abandon the fire now that it's burning." After the wounded were tended and the dead prepared for burial, Eli and Clara stood alone beside their battered house. The walls were riddled with bullet holes, windows shattered, their carefully crafted plans scattered to the wind, but it still stood. "We can rebuild," Clara said. "We will rebuild. But first—" Eli pulled her close, holding her as if she might disappear. "I thought I'd lost you. Several times during that fight I thought, but you didn't. We survived. Together." They stood there for a long moment, two people who'd started as strangers, bound by desperation and circumstance, now united by something deeper. Around them, Copper Creek citizens were already talking, planning, imagining a future without Grant's shadow over everything. "Mrs. Boone," someone called. It was Mrs. Chen holding a bundle. "I brought medical supplies from town. Thought you might need them for your clinic." "I don't have a clinic anymore," Clara said. "You will," Mrs. Chen said confidently. "Bigger and better than before. The whole town's talking about it. How we need a proper hospital, a real doctor, maybe even a school for nurses. And everyone knows you're the one to run it." Clara looked at Eli, who smiled. "Told you we were building more than just a house." That evening, the town meeting was held in Murphy's saloon, the only building big enough to hold everyone who wanted to attend. The federal marshal was there taking notes, making it clear that federal oversight would continue until proper governance was established. Eli was elected to the new town council despite his protests. Clara was officially asked to establish and run a proper hospital with funding from Grant's seized assets. It was decided that the mines would be run cooperatively with safety as the first priority and profits shared among the workers. "It won't be easy," the federal marshal warned. "Grant has lawyers' connections. He'll fight the charges." "Let him," Jack Walsh said. "We've got something better than lawyers. We've got the truth and the courage to speak it." As they rode home that night, home to their bullet-riddled house on Widow's Peak, Clara thought about transformation. The town had transformed from cowed to courageous. She had transformed from desperate widow to fighter and healer. And Eli. She looked at him in the moonlight, this scarred man who'd promised her a home and given her so much more. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "About Martha Hayes, the widow who gave this peak its name. What about her? I wonder if she was really waiting for her husband to return, or if she was waiting for something else. A reason to keep living, a purpose beyond grief." Clara paused. "I think maybe she found it up here above everything, the same way we have." They worked through the night, preparing the house for real winter, patching the worst of the bullet holes, securing what could be secured. Tomorrow would bring more work funerals, to attend a hospital, to plan a town to help rebuild. But tonight was theirs, two people who'd found each other in the darkest of circumstances and chosen to build light. As dawn approached, painting the peaks in shades of rose and gold, Eli rang the bell again. But this time it wasn't a call to war. It was an announcement, a declaration, a promise that something new was beginning on Widow's Peak. From the town below, other bells answered. The church bell, the school bell, even the old fire bell that hadn't rung in years. They created a chorus that echoed across the mountains, a symphony of hope, where before there had only been silence and fear. "Listen to that," Clara said, leaning against Eli as they stood watching the sunrise. "It's beautiful," he agreed. "It's more than that. It's proof." "Of what?" "That courage is contagious. That one small act of defiance can become a revolution. That two broken people can build something whole." She turned to face him fully. "Eli, I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the morning air like suspended snowflakes. Eli's face went through several expressions: shock, joy, fear, and finally something that looked like awe. We're going to have a baby, yes." "But you said the miscarriages." "I know, but this feels different, stronger." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "Maybe it's this place, this air, this life we're building, but I think this one's going to make it." Eli pulled her into his arms, and she could feel him trembling. "A family," he whispered. "A real family. The first of many if the town has its way. Did you hear them talking about an orphanage? They want us to run that too." "Of course they do." But he was smiling. "Clara, are you happy?" She considered the question. 6 weeks ago, she'd been dying slowly in Copper Creek, crushed by debt and despair. Now she stood on a mountain beside a man she loved, carrying his child, having just survived a battle that freed an entire town from tyranny. "Yes," she said simply, "happier than I've ever been. Even with everything, the danger, the violence, the uncertainty, because of everything. We've been tested and survived. We've built something worth defending. We've found each other." She kissed him softly. James would understand. Sarah would too. They loved us enough to want us to live, really live, not just survive. The sun climbed higher, warming their faces, melting the last of the violent snow. Below, the town was waking to its first day of real freedom in years. There would be challenges, Grant's trial, rebuilding the economy, healing the wounds left by years of oppression. But for the first time, there was also hope. "We should go down," Eli said. "Help with the funerals. Start planning the hospital." "In a moment," Clara said. "First, I want to remember this. Standing here with you, looking at our future spread out before us like this valley. Knowing we earned it, fought for it, chose it." They stood together as the bell's echoes faded and the new day truly began. Their house still needed walls, windows, a roof that didn't leak. The town below still needed healing leadership and time to grow into its newfound freedom. And they themselves still had much to learn about being partners, parents, and pillars of a community that would look to them for years to come. But they had begun. That was the miracle, not the victory over Grant, not the federal marshal's convenient arrival, not even the town's courage in the face of professional killers. The miracle was that two broken people had found each other in the darkness and chosen to build rather than surrender to hope, rather than despair to love, rather than merely survive. "Ready?" Eli asked. "For anything," Clara replied. They walked down the mountain together toward the town that waited for them, their shadows stretching long across the snow, but their faces turned toward the light. Behind them, the bell hung silent but ready, waiting for the next time it would need to ring for celebration, for gathering, for the announcement of new life entering the world. The revolution was over. The real work was about to begin. In Murphy's saloon, which had become the unofficial headquarters of the new Copper Creek, they found organized chaos. Jack Walsh was coordinating work crews to repair damage from the battle. Mrs. Chen was organizing food distribution for families whose breadwinners had been killed or wounded. Doc Holbrook, still sober and looking somewhat amazed by that fact, was treating minor injuries and arguing with the federal marshal about medical protocols. "Clara, Eli," Jack called out. "Good, you're here. We need to discuss Grant's house." "What about it?" Eli asked. "It's the biggest building in town. Folks think it should become the hospital. It's got running water, plenty of rooms, even that newfangled electricity Grant had installed last year. Seems fitting, don't you think? The place that hoarded wealth becoming a place of healing." Clara felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of old grief. "It's perfect," she said. "But we'll need supplies, equipment, trained staff." "Already being arranged," Mrs. Chen interrupted. "My nephew in San Francisco is a doctor. Western trained, but he knows Chinese medicine too. He's been looking for a place to practice where both would be welcome. I've sent him a telegram." "And my daughter wants to learn nursing," another woman added. "She's smart, dedicated. Others too, we could have a proper school." The planning continued through the morning, each person contributing ideas, resources, or promises of labor. It was democracy in its rawest form. Messy, loud, sometimes contradictory, but alive with possibility. The federal marshal pulled Eli aside at one point, and Clara followed, sensing important news. "Grant's lawyers are already filing motions," the marshal said quietly. "They're claiming the whole thing was self-defense, that you and the townspeople were the aggressors." "That's ridiculous," Clara protested. "Of course it is. But he's got money for good lawyers, and some judges are sympathetic to men like him. You'll need to testify, both of you, and it won't be pleasant. They'll dig into your past, try to discredit you." "Let them dig," Eli said flatly. "I've got nothing to hide anymore." "What about Sarah?" "They'll use her death against you." "Then I'll tell the truth. All of it. Even the parts that hurt." He looked at Clara. "Unless you'd rather not have that dragged into public." "We face it together," Clara said firmly. "Whatever comes." The marshal nodded. "Good. With the town unified and willing to testify, we should be able to make the charges stick. But it'll take time. Months, maybe a year. We're not going anywhere, Eli assured him. That afternoon was the funerals. 3 townspeople had died defending Widow's Peak, a miner named Tom Garrett, who'd left behind a wife and 4 children, an elderly rancher named William Stone, who'd said he'd rather die on his feet than live on his knees, and Martha Williams, the schoolteacher who'd stood singing hymns in the middle of a gunfight. The entire town attended. Even some of Grant's former employees who'd switched sides at the last moment came to pay respects. The preacher, a young man who'd always seemed afraid of his own shadow, spoke with unexpected fire about courage, sacrifice, and the price of freedom. "These 3," he said, standing beside the open graves, "died so that we might live free. Not exist, but truly live." They saw a chance for something better and grabbed it with both hands, even knowing the cost. We honor them not with tears, though tears are appropriate, but with the promise to build the town they died defending. A place of justice, opportunity, and hope. Clara spoke at Martha's grave. "She taught our children letters and numbers," Clara said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "But in her last moments, she taught us all something more important, that there are things worth standing for, literally standing for, even when bullets are flying. She stood up and sang, reminding us that we were fighting for more than survival. We were fighting for the right to raise our voices without fear." When they lowered the coffins, the bell on Widow's Peak rang out its bronze voice carrying across the valley. Then every bell in town joined in a farewell that echoed off the mountains and seemed to go on forever. That evening, as Clara and Eli finally returned to their bullet-scarred house, they found someone waiting for them. A young woman heavily pregnant with the hollow look of someone who'd traveled hard and far. "Are you Mrs. Boone?" she asked Clara. "The healer." "I am. What do you need?" "My husband, he worked for Grant. One of the hired guns. He's dead now, died in the fight." The woman's voice was steady, but tears tracked down her cheeks. "I've got nowhere to go, no money, and this baby's coming soon. They said in town you might help." Clara felt Eli tense beside her, but she stepped forward without hesitation. "Of course. Come inside. What's your name?" "Rebecca. Rebecca Tucker." Clara froze. Tucker's widow. The man she'd shot in the storm who'd threatened her, who'd died in the battle. His pregnant widow stood before her seeking help. "You know who I am," Rebecca said, seeing Clara's reaction. "You know who my husband was. I'll understand if you turn me away." "No," Clara said, finding her voice. "No one gets turned away. That's not who we are. That's not who we're going to be." She led Rebecca inside, getting her settled, examining her with professional hands, while her mind reeled. The baby was close, maybe days away. Rebecca was malnourished, exhausted, but the baby seemed healthy. "Why did you come here?" Eli asked, his voice careful. "You must know, I know my husband tried to kill you multiple times." Rebecca's voice was bitter. "He wasn't always like that. Before the war, he was gentle, kind. But something broke in him over there, and he came back different. Grant offered him work, and killing was all he knew how to do anymore." She looked at Clara. "I heard what you did in town, taking in anyone who needs help. I thought maybe you could help me break this cycle, give this baby a chance at something better." Clara and Eli exchanged glances, a whole conversation in a look. Then Clara took Rebecca's hand. "You'll stay here until the baby comes," Clara said. "After that, we'll figure out what's next. There's going to be work at the new hospital, cleaning, cooking, maybe training as a nurse if you're interested. A fresh start." Rebecca broke down crying, then great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Clara held her while she wept, this woman whose husband had tried to kill them, offering comfort that transcended the violence that had brought them together. Later, after Rebecca was settled in what would eventually be the spare bedroom, Clara and Eli stood on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "That was a hell of a thing you did," Eli said. "It was the only thing to do. We can't build a better town if we're carrying the old hatred forward." "She could be a threat. Could be here for revenge." "Maybe. But I don't think so. I think she's just a scared pregnant widow looking for hope." Clara leaned against him. "Besides, weren't we taking in orphans anyway? Maybe we're just getting an early start. Our own child isn't even born yet, and you're already collecting others. Family isn't just blood, you said that yourself. It's choice commitment, courage. Rebecca chose to come here despite everything. That took courage. Now we choose what to do about it. Eli was quiet for a moment, then chuckled. A week ago, we were fighting for our lives. Now we're planning hospitals and taking in the widows of men who tried to kill us. How did we get here? One step at a time, Clara said. One choice at a time, each one leading to the next, until here we are standing on a mountain we've claimed with blood and hope, building something that might outlast us both. No regrets. None. You. Only one. What's that? That it took me 6 years to come back. 6 years we could have been building instead of grieving separately. We weren't ready then. We had to break first, completely break before we could rebuild into something stronger. She turned to face him. Eli, I need you to understand something. What we have, it's not a replacement for what we lost. It's not James and Sarah's leftovers. It's ours, completely ours, built from scratch on the ashes of our old lives. I know, he said softly. That's what makes it worth everything we've been through. They went inside where Rebecca slept fitfully on the cot they'd set up, her hands protective over her swollen belly. Clara checked on her once more, adjusting her blanket, feeling the baby kick under her palm, life insisting on itself despite everything. That night as they lay in their own bed, a real bed. Now not just bedrolls on the floor, Clara felt the first flutter of movement in her own womb. Faint, possibly imagined, but there. Eli? She whispered. I felt it, the baby, moving. His hand found her stomach in the darkness, warm and careful. Really? I think so. It's early, but yes, life, Eli. We're making life in a place that's seen so much death. Maybe that's the point, he said. Maybe that's always the point. To keep building, keep creating, keep choosing life, even when death seems easier. Outside snow began to fall again, but gentle this time, like a blessing on their roof. The house creaked and settled around them, still wounded, but standing still, incomplete but sheltering. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Grant's lawyers, the hospital planning, Rebecca's baby, their own future to navigate. But tonight they had this each other. The promise of new life, a town free to choose its own path, and the knowledge that they had stood when standing seemed impossible and prevailed when defeat seemed certain. The bell on Widow's Peak was silent now, but its promise echoed in the quiet snow in the sleeping town below, in the hearts of two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build light. They had won more than a battle. They had won the right to hope, and on a mountain named for waiting in a house built by unlikely love that was revolution enough. Rebecca's baby came during the first blizzard of December, 3 days after she'd arrived at their door. Clara had delivered hundreds of babies in her years as a nurse, but this one felt different, weighted with the strange symmetry of delivering the child of a man who'd tried to kill them. Push Rebecca, Clara encouraged, while Eli boiled water and tore sheets, falling into the rhythm they'd developed that first night in the clinic. The baby's coming, Rebecca screamed, gripping Clara's hand hard enough to leave bruises. Outside, the wind howled like something alive and angry, rattling the windows they'd just finished replacing. The storm had trapped them on the mountain, no way to get to town, no way to call for help if something went wrong. I can't, Rebecca gasped. I can't do this without him. Yes, you can, Clara said firmly. You're stronger than you know. Now push. The baby arrived just as dawn broke through the storm clouds, a healthy girl with her father's dark hair but her mother's gentle eyes. Rebecca wept as Clara placed the infant on her chest, the kind of tears that held grief and joy in equal measure. What will you name her? Clara asked, cleaning up while Rebecca nursed the baby for the first time. Hope, Rebecca said softly. It seems appropriate, don't you think, finding hope in a place I came expecting judgment? Eli appeared in the doorway carrying fresh coffee. He'd stayed up all night keeping watch, maintaining the fire being present without intruding. He looked at the baby with an expression Clara couldn't quite read. She's beautiful, he said simply. Would you like to hold her? Rebecca asked, surprising everyone, including herself. Eli hesitated, looking at Clara, who nodded. He took the baby with careful hands, cradling her like spun glass. Hope opened her eyes and seemed to study him with that unfocused intensity newborns possessed. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said suddenly, "for what my husband did, for what he tried to do." "That wasn't your fault," Eli replied, still looking at the baby. "Wasn't it? I knew what he was, what he'd become. I stayed anyway, told myself it was loyalty, but maybe it was just cowardice. Or maybe it was love," Clara said gently. "Love makes us do incomprehensible things sometimes." The storm lasted 2 more days, trapping them in a strange domestic bubble. Rebecca recovered slowly, and Clara found herself teaching the younger woman about infant care herbs that promoted healing, how to read the baby's different cries. Eli worked on the house, finishing interior walls, carving details into door frames, roses as always, but also small birds that looked ready to take flight. On the 3rd morning, Clara woke to sunshine and the sound of horses approaching. She grabbed the rifle by instinct now, but Eli was already at the window. "It's Jack Walsh," he said, "with others." They'd brought supplies, food, medicine, lumber for the continuing construction, and news from town. The federal prosecutor had arrived to prepare the case against Grant. The man wanted to interview Clara and Eli as soon as possible. "There's something else," Jack said, accepting coffee while stamping snow from his boots. "Grant's made a deal. Information about other corrupt operations in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's claiming you were his partner in it all, Eli. Says he has documents proving you profited from the unsafe mines." "That's a lie," Clara said hotly, but Eli held up a hand. "He's half right," he admitted. "I was his partner. I did profit at first. Before I knew what he was really doing, those documents probably exist." "But you tried to stop him," Clara protested. "You lost everything standing up to him." "Try proving that in court 6 years later," Jack said grimly. "Grant's lawyers are already spinning a tale about how you came back for revenge after a business deal went bad. They're painting you as the villain and Grant as a legitimate businessman defending himself." Rebecca had been listening from her bed, the baby nursing quietly. "I could testify," she said suddenly. "My husband kept records, diary entries, letters. He wrote everything down, who hired him, what, for how much they paid. It was his insurance policy." She looked at them steadily. "I know where they're hidden." The room went silent, except for the baby's soft suckling sounds and the fire crackling in the hearth. "Why would you do that?" Eli asked. "Because you took me in when you had every reason to throw me out. Because I want my daughter to grow up in a town where justice means something." She shifted the baby to her other breast. "And because my husband may have lost his soul, but I haven't lost mine. Not yet." 2 days later, when the trails were passable, they made the journey to town. Clara and Eli rode together while Rebecca followed in the wagon, with Hope bundled against the cold. The town looked different under its blanket of snow cleaners somehow, as if the white had covered all the old sins. The federal prosecutor was a thin man named Patterson with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. He listened to their testimonies, took notes, asked probing questions that made Clara understand why Grant's lawyers were worried. "Mrs. Tucker's evidence could be crucial," Patterson said after reviewing everything. "But we need those documents. Where are they?" Rebecca directed them to a cabin 5 miles outside town, a place Tucker had kept that even Grant hadn't known about. They found it exactly as she'd described, rough, but organized with a hidden compartment under the floorboards containing several journals and a leather portfolio of letters. Patterson whistled low as he read through them. "This implicates half the territory's power structure, judges, senators, even a federal marshal or two." He looked up at them. "This is bigger than just Grant. This could bring down a whole network of corruption." "Good," Eli said flatly. "It also means you've made powerful enemies, all of you. They'll come after you legally if they can, other ways if they can't." "Then we'd better be ready," Clara said, her hand unconsciously moving to her slightly rounded belly. The trial began in February when Clara was 5 months pregnant and showing clearly. She testified for 3 days, detailing Grant's exploitation of the town, the debts he'd used to control people, the unsafe conditions he'd maintained to maximize profits. She spoke clearly, calmly, even when Grant's lawyers tried to paint her as a bitter widow, seduced by a vengeful former partner. Eli's testimony was harder to watch. Grant's lawyers hammered at him, bringing up Sarah's death, suggesting he'd driven her to suicide, implying he'd come back to steal what Grant had built. Through it all, Eli remained steady, answering truthfully, even when the truth hurt. "Yes, I profited from the mines initially," he said. "Yes, I bear responsibility for not investigating sooner. But when I learned the truth, I tried to stop it. And when that failed, I left everything behind rather than continue profiting from death." "How convenient," Grant's lawyer sneered. "You developed a conscience just in time to avoid responsibility." "I developed a conscience too late to save 14 lives," Eli replied quietly. "I live with that every day. But at least I'm trying to atone. What's Grant doing except trying to escape justice again?" It was Rebecca's testimony that turned the tide. She appeared in court wearing black, still in mourning for a husband she'd loved and lost long before his death. She spoke softly but clearly, reading from Tucker's journals, dates and names, and amounts paid for violence done in Grant's name. September 15th. She read, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Grant paid $500 for the beating of Jonas Mills, who'd refused to sell his water rights. October 2nd, $1,000 for the fire at the Hendersons' ranch after they supported the wrong candidate for sheriff. November 8th, $2,000 to eliminate Tom Boone, who was set to testify about safety violations. The courtroom erupted. This was the first confirmation that Eli's brother's death had been murder, not robbery. Clara reached for Eli's hand, feeling him tremble with suppressed rage. Grant himself took the stand on the final day, still trying to paint himself as a successful businessman persecuted by jealous competitors. But Patterson was ready for him, armed with documents, testimonies, and the accumulated evidence of years of corruption. "You say you're a legitimate businessman, Mr. Grant," Patterson said. "Can you explain why you paid Tucker $2,000 on November 8th? Security services. The territory was lawless. I needed protection. Protection from Tom Boone, a shopkeeper with 3 children who'd never held a gun in his life. I don't recall the specifics. Let me refresh your memory." Patterson produced Tucker's journal. November 8th. Grant wants Tom Boone silenced before the safety hearing. Make it look random. Full payment on completion. Does that refresh your memory? Grant's face had gone gray. His lawyers objected, argued, tried every legal maneuver, but the damage was done. The jury had heard enough. They deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: murder, conspiracy, corruption, extortion. The judge, brought in from Denver to ensure impartiality, sentenced Grant to life in prison with no possibility of parole. As they led Grant away, he turned to stare at Eli with naked hatred. "This isn't over," he said. "I have friends. Resources you don't know about. This isn't over." "Yes," Eli said calmly, "it is." But Clara wondered. Men like Grant didn't accept defeat easily. Even from prison, he could potentially cause trouble. She pushed the worry aside. They dealt with whatever came, as they always had together. The town celebrated that night. Murphy's Saloon offered free drinks. The church bells rang for a solid hour, and people danced in the snowy streets despite the cold. Clara and Eli attended, briefly accepting congratulations, but both were exhausted from the trial's emotional toll. They returned to Widow's Peak to find Rebecca packing. "You're leaving?" Clara asked, surprised at how much the thought hurt. "I thought, now that the trial's over, you wouldn't want us here. Hope and I were reminders of everything that happened." "You're reminders that good can come from bad," Eli said firmly. "That people can choose to be better than their circumstances. You're welcome here as long as you want to stay." Rebecca looked between them, tears starting again. "You mean that we've got a big house to fill," Clara said, patting her growing belly. "This little one will need playmates, and I'll need help at the hospital when it opens. If you're interested in training as a nurse—" "Yes," Rebecca said quickly. "Yes, I'm interested." So Rebecca stayed, and as winter turned to spring, their strange family took shape. The house on Widow's Peak was finally complete. 2 stories, 5 bedrooms, the medical office Clara had dreamed of, and Eli's workshop, where he carved furniture that was beginning to earn a reputation throughout the territory. The hospital in Grant's former mansion opened in April, with Dr. Chen, Mrs. Chen's nephew, as the primary physician and Clara as head administrator. They started a nursing school with Rebecca as one of the first students alongside 6 other women from town. Claire's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though she remained anxious given her history. Dr. Chen examined her regularly, combining Western medicine with traditional Chinese practices that seemed to ease her symptoms. Eli hovered protectively, sometimes irritatingly so. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one day in May, as he tried to prevent her from lifting a box of medical supplies. "You're carrying our child," he replied. "That makes you precious beyond measure." "I carried dozens of boxes when I was pregnant with James's babies, Kilm," she said, then froze, realizing what she'd said. They'd never talked directly about her lost pregnancies with her first husband. "And look how that turned out," Eli said gently. "Let's try something different this time. Let me help carry the weight." She let him take the box. Understanding that this wasn't really about the physical burden, but about his need to protect what they'd built to ensure this child succeeded where others had failed. In June, news came that shook their growing peace. Grant had been killed in prison, stabbed by another inmate during a dispute. The official report called it a random act of violence, but Clara wondered. Grant had been about to testify about the broader corruption network in exchange for a transfer to a minimum security facility. His death conveniently silenced him. "Someone wanted him quiet," Eli said that night as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Rebecca was inside putting Hope to bed, singing a lullaby that drifted through the windows. "Does it matter now?" Clara asked. "He's gone. The threat's over." "Maybe. Or maybe we just traded one threat for another. The people Grant was going to testify against, they're still out there. Then we'll deal with them if they come. We've faced worse." "Have we?" He looked at her seriously. "We faced a small-town tyrant with delusions of grandeur. The people behind him, the ones who really run things, they're different, smarter, more patient." "More to lose," Clara countered. "Coming after us now would only draw attention. Better to let sleeping dogs lie." She was right, at least for the moment. Summer passed peacefully. The hospital thrived, treating everything from mining accidents to difficult pregnancies. The nursing school grew, attracting students from neighboring towns. The new town council, with Jack Walsh as mayor and Eli as a key member, instituted safety regulations for the mine's fair lending practices and actual democratic elections. Clara's baby came on a September morning, almost exactly a year after Eli had first walked into her clinic. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with Dr. Chen attending and Rebecca assisting. Eli paced outside like a caged wolf until Clara demanded he come in. "I need you," she said between contractions. "Don't make me do this alone." He held her hand as she pushed whispered encouragement when she wanted to give up and cried openly when their son was born healthy and squalling. "What should we name him?" Clara asked, exhausted but euphoric, watching Eli cradle their child with wonder. "Thomas," Eli said without hesitation, "after my brother, and James after yours." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas James Boone, it's perfect." "He's perfect," Eli corrected, touching the baby's impossibly small fingers. "We made this, Clara. Out of all that death and pain, we made life." The bell on Widow's Peak rang out announcement of the birth, carrying across the valley. Soon other bells joined in the town, celebrating the new life that somehow symbolized all their new beginnings. As Claire recovered, she watched their unconventional family form around her. Rebecca, who'd become like a sister, helping with Thomas while continuing her nursing studies. Hope toddling, now fascinated by the new baby. Eli transformed by fatherhood into something softer while remaining fiercely protective. The house filled with visitors bringing gifts and well wishes. Mrs. Chen brought herbs for recovery and a beautiful silk blanket for Thomas. Jack Walsh brought a rocking horse Eli would have to store for years before Thomas could use it. Even the federal prosecutor Patterson, back to check on the town's progress, stopped by with an unexpected gift, a college fund for Thomas established with money seized from Grant's illegal operations. "Seems fitting," Patterson said. "Let something good grow from all that corruption." By Thomas's first birthday, their family had grown again. They'd taken in 2 orphan boys whose parents had died in a mine collapse, brothers aged 6 and 8, wild as mountain cats but hungry for stability. Rebecca had completed her nursing training and was working full-time at the hospital while raising Hope. The house that had seemed so large now felt exactly the right size. Clara stood in her medical office one evening, updating patient records while listening to the chaos of family life around her. Eli was teaching the boys to whittle while Rebecca helped Hope with her letters. Baby Thomas slept in his cradle beside Clara's desk, making soft baby sounds in his dreams. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd married James all those years ago. That life had been planned, organized, following a prescribed path marriage, children growing old together in predictable comfort. This life was messier, built from broken pieces, unexpected turns, and choices made in desperation that had somehow led to joy. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Eli, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Thought you could use this," he said, setting one on her desk. "You know me well." I should hope so after everything we've been through." He sat in the chair across from her, the one where patients usually sat. "Clara, I've been thinking. Dangerous habit. I'm serious. We've built something amazing here. The house, the family, the hospital, the town's transformation. But I can't shake the feeling we're not done." "What do you mean?" "There are other Copper Creeks out there, other towns under the boot of men like Grant. What if what we did here could be replicated?" Clara leaned back, studying him. "You want to leave, start over somewhere else?" "No, never leave. This is home. But what if we could teach others? Create a model that could be followed. We have Patterson's ear connections to federal authorities now. We could make real change, not just here, but across the territory." "That's ambitious." So was standing up to Grant with nothing but determination and a half-built house. She considered it. The hospital was running smoothly now, with Dr. Chen fully capable of managing it. The nursing school had graduated its first class. The town had found its footing. Maybe it was time to think bigger. "What would that look like?" she asked. "Writing legislation about mining safety workers' rights, fair lending practices. Training programs for nurses and doctors willing to work in frontier towns. Maybe even a book about what we've learned, how a community can transform itself." "A book you want to be an author now?" "We'd write it together. Our story, but also the town's story. A blueprint for revolution that doesn't require armies, just courage and cooperation." Clara looked around her office at the medical text that had belonged to James at the new certificates on the wall, marking her as hospital administrator at the cradle where their son slept peacefully. Then she looked at Eli, this man who'd walked into her life with an impossible proposition and had somehow made it all real. "All right," she said. "Let's change the world, one small town at a time." He smiled, that rare transformative expression that still made her heart skip. "Together. Is there any other way?" That night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Clara and Eli stood on their porch, looking out over the valley. Copper Creek's lights twinkled below. No longer the desperate gleam of a dying town, but the steady glow of a community that had found its strength. "Do you think Martha Hayes would approve?" Clara asked. The original widow of Widow's Peak. "I think she'd understand that some peaks are worth the climb, no matter how long it takes or how much it costs. And that sometimes what we're waiting for isn't what we think we're waiting for." Exactly. She thought she was waiting for her husband. Maybe she was really waiting for herself to become someone who could survive alone, who could find meaning in solitude. "We found meaning in connection," Clara observed. "Yes. In building something together neither of us could have built alone." The bell hung silent in the darkness, but its presence was felt, a promise that when needed, it would ring again. For celebration or warning, for gathering or farewell, it would speak for them all. 5 years later, Clara stood in the same spot, though everything else had changed. The house had been expanded again to accommodate their growing family. Thomas now had a sister, Sarah Martha, and they'd taken in 3 more orphans. Rebecca had married Dr. Chen's assistant, a young doctor from Philadelphia who'd come west for adventure and found love instead. They'd built their own house nearby, close enough that the children could run between homes. The hospital had become a regional medical center, drawing patients from 3 territories. The nursing school had graduated 50 nurses who'd spread across the frontier, taking with them the principles of care and community Clara had instilled. The town itself had tripled in size, with safe mines, fair businesses, and actual democratic governance. And the book, From Widow's Peak, A Frontier Revolution, had been published, spreading their story across the country. Letters arrived weekly from other towns trying to replicate their success, asking for advice, sharing their own struggles and triumphs. "Mama, look," Thomas called, pointing to the sunrise just beginning to paint the peaks gold. "It's beautiful." "Yes," Clara agreed, pulling her son close. "It's beautiful." Eli joined them carrying Sarah, while the other children tumbled out onto the porch, drawn by the dawn light. Rebecca and her family emerged from their house, and soon they were all standing together watching the sun rise over a valley transformed. "Tell us the story again," yet one of the younger children demanded. "About when Papa came to the clinic." "Again," Eli groaned theatrically. "You've heard it 100 times. Please," a chorus of young voices pleaded. Clara smiled. Once upon a time, a stranger walked into a broken woman's clinic and made an impossible proposition. As she told the story, their story, Clara reflected on how that desperate bargain had become something neither of them could have imagined. Not just a marriage, but a partnership. Not just a house, but a home. Not just a family, but a community. Not just survival, but triumph. The sun climbed higher, warming their faces, illuminating the town below that had once been dying and now thrived. The bell caught the light, gleaming like hope itself. "And they lived happily ever after?" little Sarah asked when the story ended. Clara looked at Eli, at Rebecca, at their collected children, at the town spread below them like a testament to what courage could accomplish. "No," she said. "They lived, really lived, with purpose and love and the knowledge that they'd chosen to build rather than surrender. And that, my dear ones, is better than any fairy tale." The bell rang out across the valley, not in warning or summons, but in pure celebration of the morning of life continuing, of hope, fulfilled and renewed. From the town below, other bells answered, creating a symphony that echoed off the mountains and seemed to reach the very sky. On Widow's Peak, where a grieving woman had once waited 20 years for a ghost, a family stood together watching the world wake to another day of possibility. They had built more than a house, more than a hospital, more than a town. They had built proof that even in the darkest places, light could be kindled. Even in the most desperate circumstances, hope could take root. And sometimes, just sometimes, two broken people could come together and create something whole, something beautiful, something that would last long after they were gone. A legacy not of gold or silver, but of courage, compassion, and the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than yesterday if you were willing to fight for it. The revolution that had begun with 6 words in a dimly lit clinic had become something larger than any of them. It had become a story that would be told for generations, proof that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they stood together, when they chose hope over fear, when they decided that building was better than accepting the ruins. And on a mountain called Widow's Peak, where the wind sang through the pines and the bells stood ready to ring, a family that shouldn't exist continued to thrive, living proof that some foundations once laid in love and determination could indeed last forever.